You've been taught that stillness means nothing, that silence is empty, that if your mind becomes quiet, you are wasting time. But if that were true, why does noise leave you exhausted? Why does constant thinking feel heavy? Why do you feel restless even when your life is full? The truth is this: stillness is not empty, it is deeply settled. It is the place where the mind stops searching, where the body finally feels safe, where nothing needs to be added and nothing needs to be removed. For thousands of years, Buddhist teachings have pointed to this state, not as an escape, but as a return to what has always been steady beneath the noise. They understood that peace is not found in control. It appears when resistance ends, that clarity does not come from more thought, but when thought is no longer in charge. As you listen, your system will begin to settle. Your breathing will slow on its own. The tightness you've been carrying will soften without effort, without forcing calm. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about resting as you are, feeling grounded, feeling present, without trying to fix yourself. This is not emptiness. This is depth. This is stability. This is peace that does not depend on conditions. Stillness is not empty, it is deeply settled. Are you ready? Let's begin. The words you just heard are not meant to stay as ideas. They are meant to lead you somewhere quieter. Not quieter on the outside, but deeper on the inside. What comes next is not a new concept to collect or a belief to hold on to. It is a slow movement away from effort and towards something more honest. We are not leaving the introduction behind. We are letting it settle, the same way the body settles when it realizes it does not have to defend itself anymore. There is a moment most people miss. It happens when nothing is happening. The phone is quiet. The room is still. No task is demanding attention. And instead of peace, there is discomfort. A subtle urge to move, to think, to check, to do something. This moment is important. It is the doorway most people turn away from. And it is exactly where stillness begins to show its true nature. Stillness does not arrive because thoughts stop. Thoughts are not the enemy. Trying to stop them only creates more tension. True stillness appears when attention matures, when it no longer jumps from sound to sound, from memory to memory, from worry to hope. At first, attention is restless. It behaves like a child in a crowded room, pulled by every movement, every noise, every promise of stimulation. This is not a flaw. It is simply untrained attention doing what it has learned to do in a world designed to pull it apart. Most people believe peace will come when their thoughts become positive or when their mind becomes quiet. That belief keeps them stuck, because attention does not settle by force. It settles by understanding. It settles when it no longer needs to chase or resist. When attention begins to mature, it stops scattering, not because it is controlled, but because it is satisfied. This is subtle, and because it is subtle, it is often overlooked. Attention matures the same way fruit ripens. You do not pull on it, you do not rush it. You provide the right conditions, and something natural happens on its own. When attention ripens, it becomes steady without effort. It rests where it is placed, not because it is held there, but because it no longer feels the need to escape. At first, when you sit quietly or pause during the day, attention will feel unstable. It will drift into thoughts, plans, memories, fantasies. This is normal. The mistake is believing this means you are doing something wrong. In reality, you are seeing clearly for the first time how scattered attention already is. Awareness reveals the truth before it transforms it. Each time attention wanders and you notice it, something important happens. You are not failing. You are strengthening awareness. Awareness is what allows attention to mature. Without awareness, attention remains unconscious, driven by habit and fear. With awareness, attention slowly learns it does not need to follow every impulse. Stillness grows when attention realizes it is safe to stay, safe in the body, safe in the present moment, safe without constant stimulation. This sense of safety is not created by thought, it is felt in the nervous system. When attention keeps returning gently without judgment, the body begins to trust stillness. And when the body trusts stillness, attention no longer needs to scatter. This is why forcing concentration often backfires. Tight focus creates tension. Tension tells the nervous system something is wrong, and when something feels wrong, attention looks for an exit. True stillness requires a soft attention, not a rigid one, an attention that is interested, not demanding, curious, not controlling. As attention matures, something unexpected happens. Thoughts continue to appear, but they lose their grip. They are noticed without being followed. They arise and fade like sounds in the distance. You do not need to push them away. You do not need to analyze them. Attention simply does not cling to them anymore. This is not detachment in the cold sense. It is intimacy without entanglement. Attention is fully present but not stuck. It is like watching clouds move across the sky without trying to rearrange them. The sky does not need to stop clouds to remain open. Many people fear this state because they confuse scattering with aliveness. They believe that without constant thought, they will become dull or empty. But what actually happens is the opposite. As attention matures, perception becomes clearer. Colors appear richer, sounds feel more precise, sensations become more vivid. Life feels closer, not farther away. Stillness is not numbness. It is sensitivity without overwhelm. When attention is no longer pulled in 1,000 directions, it has the capacity to fully receive what is here. This is why stillness feels deeply settled rather than blank. There is weight to it, density, a sense of grounded presence that does not depend on activity. Another misunderstanding is believing that attention matures through time alone. Time helps, but only when accompanied by honesty. If attention is constantly fed with distraction, it does not ripen. It becomes more dependent. Just as sugar dulls taste, constant stimulation dulls attention. Stillness may feel uncomfortable at first because attention has forgotten how to rest. This discomfort is not a sign to stop. It is a sign that attention is detoxing from constant movement. Just as the body reacts when habits change, attention reacts when it is no longer entertained. Restlessness surfaces, boredom appears, old thoughts rise. This is not regression, this is exposure. If you stay with this phase without escaping, something shifts. Attention begins to see that the discomfort is survivable, that nothing bad happens when it stays, and this realization changes everything. Once attention knows it does not need to run, it starts to settle naturally. This settling is not sudden. It unfolds quietly. You may notice moments during the day when you are simply present without effort, waiting in line, washing your hands, sitting in silence. There is no commentary, no urge to improve the moment, just being. These moments are signs of maturing attention. As attention matures, it becomes less personal. Thoughts still appear, but they are no longer owned in the same way. They are events, not identities. This reduces inner conflict. There is less arguing with yourself, less trying to fix yourself. Stillness grows in the space where self-negotiation ends. Importantly, this does not make you passive. It makes you clear. When attention is settled, action becomes precise. You respond instead of react. Decisions arise from clarity rather than pressure. Stillness does not remove movement, it refines it. You may notice that when attention is settled, time feels different. There is less urgency. Moments feel complete rather than rushed. This is because scattered attention fragments experience. Settled attention allows experience to be whole. Nothing is missing. True stillness is not something you hold on to. The moment you try to possess it, it slips away. It functions more like a background stability than a foreground achievement. It is what remains when attention is no longer divided. This is why teachings point not to stopping thought, but to understanding attention. Thoughts are symptoms. Attention is the root. When attention matures, thought naturally quiets without suppression. And when thought quiets naturally, stillness feels alive rather than forced. Eventually, attention rests in itself, not in an object, not in a sensation, not in a concept. It rests as awareness. This is deeply settled stillness. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It feels ordinary and profound at the same time. From here, peace is no longer something you visit. It becomes the ground you stand on. Challenges still arise. Emotions still move. Life continues to change, but attention no longer scatters in fear. It stays, and in staying it discovers that stillness was never empty. It was always full of quiet strength, waiting for attention to grow up and come home. What was just touched is not finished. When attention stops scattering, something deeper begins to speak. Not in words, not as an insight, but as a feeling in the body. A quiet signal that says, you can rest now. This is where stillness moves from the mind into the flesh, from awareness into the nervous system. What settles next is not thought, it is the body itself. There is a reason why, even when you understand peace, your body may still feel tense. Why you can agree with calm ideas and still feel tight inside. This is because the body does not change through understanding. It changes through experience. And deep stillness is one of the few experiences powerful enough to re-educate the nervous system. Here is something rarely said clearly. Your body remembers everything, not as stories, but as patterns. It remembers stress. It remembers danger. It remembers urgency. Long before the mind learned language, the nervous system learned how to survive. It learned to stay alert. It learned to brace. It learned to prepare for what might go wrong. Over time, this became its normal state. For many people, tension feels normal. Rest feels unfamiliar. Calm feels suspicious. This is not because something is wrong with you. It is because your nervous system has forgotten its original baseline of safety. Peace is not foreign to the body. It is forgotten. The nervous system has a default setting. When life feels safe, the body settles. Breathing slows. Muscles soften. The heart finds a steady rhythm. Digestion improves. Awareness widens. This state is not created by effort. It is the natural state of a regulated system. But when stress becomes chronic, the baseline shifts. Alert becomes normal. Tight becomes familiar. Rest feels like a luxury. Deep stillness begins to change this, not by thinking differently, but by staying long enough in safety for the body to relearn it. This is important. The body does not trust words. It trusts repetition. It trusts sensation. It trusts what happens again and again without harm. When you rest in stillness without forcing calm, the nervous system receives a new message. Nothing bad is happening. There is no threat. There is no demand. Over time, this message sinks below thought. At first, the body may resist. You may notice discomfort when things slow down. Restlessness, tightness, a subtle anxiety without a clear cause. This is not failure. This is stored energy surfacing. The nervous system is testing the environment. It is asking, is it really safe to let go? If you escape at this point, the old pattern stays in place. If you stay gently, without forcing relaxation, something profound happens. The body begins to update its memory. This is how healing actually works, not by fixing symptoms, but by restoring safety at the level where patterns are formed. Stillness provides a rare condition. It removes excess input. No alarms, no demands, no urgency. In this space, the nervous system starts to unwind. Muscles release not because you tell them to, but because they no longer need to hold. Breathing deepens without instruction. The jaw softens, the shoulders drop. These are signs of regulation, not relaxation techniques. The difference matters. Relaxation is something you try to do. Regulation is something that happens when the system feels safe. Many people chase calm through control. They manage their breath. They correct their posture. They try to relax harder. This often backfires because control signals danger. The nervous system hears, "Something is wrong, fix it," and it responds with more tension. Stillness works differently. It does not demand change, it allows it. As the body experiences stillness again and again, it begins to recognize it. This recognition is not mental, it is cellular. The body remembers, "Oh, this is possible," and slowly this state becomes more accessible. You begin to return to it more easily, even in daily life. This is why brief moments of deep stillness can be more transformative than hours of mental work. They speak the language the body understands. Over time, you may notice changes you did not plan. You react less quickly. Loud sounds feel less jarring. Emotional waves move through without hijacking you. You recover faster after stress. These are not personality changes. They are signs of a nervous system returning to balance. Stillness also reveals something important. Many emotional reactions are not about the present. They are echoes of past stress stored in the body. When the system is always alert, it interprets neutral situations as threats. This creates unnecessary suffering. Deep stillness creates space for these stored patterns to surface and resolve, not through analysis, through completion. When the body feels safe, it can finally release what it has been holding. This release is often subtle: a sigh, a warmth in the chest, a wave of tiredness, sometimes tears without a story. These are signs of integration. The nervous system is letting go of unfinished responses. This process cannot be rushed. The body sets the pace. Trying to push release only creates more tension. Stillness works because it respects timing. It allows the body to open when it is ready. Another shift happens quietly. The body begins to trust the present moment. This trust changes how you meet life. You do not scan for danger as much. You do not brace for impact before it arrives. You meet experiences directly, without armor. This does not make you weak. It makes you responsive. A regulated nervous system can mobilize when needed and rest when not. Chronic tension does the opposite. It keeps you half ready all the time and fully present almost never. Stillness restores flexibility, the ability to move between states without getting stuck. As this baseline of safety returns, your sense of self changes. You no longer feel like a problem that needs constant managing. There is a quiet confidence that does not come from thought. It comes from the body knowing it can handle what arises. This is why peace rooted in the nervous system feels different from peace rooted in ideas. Ideas can collapse under pressure. Regulation holds. It is also why stillness cannot be faked. The body knows. You may convince yourself you are calm, but the nervous system will reveal the truth through tension, breath, and reaction. Stillness does not argue with this. It listens. Over time, the body begins to carry peace with it, not as a mood, but as a background stability. Stressful moments still happen, but they no longer define the system. The baseline has shifted. This is a return, not an upgrade. Children live closer to this state naturally. Life trains it out of us. Stillness trains it back in. Importantly, this does not require isolation or perfect conditions. Once the nervous system learns safety, it can access it in small ways anywhere. A pause before speaking, a breath that deepens on its own, a moment of grounded presence in the middle of activity. These moments are not escapes, they are reminders. The body remembers peace. As this memory strengthens, something else fades. The constant background anxiety many people carry, the subtle feeling of being chased by time, the need to stay busy to feel okay. These dissolve not because you solved them, but because the system no longer needs them. Stillness teaches the body that safety does not depend on control, it depends on presence. This is why deep stillness is not passive, it is restorative. It repairs at a level thought cannot reach. It re-educates the nervous system through lived experience, not instruction. When the body remembers peace, the mind follows naturally. You do not need to convince yourself that you are safe. You feel it. And from this feeling, clarity, patience, and compassion arise without effort. This is how stillness moves from an idea to a foundation, not by emptying the mind, but by settling the body into a truth it never truly forgot. As the body begins to remember peace, something unexpected often appears. Instead of relief, there can be unease. Instead of calm, there can be tension. This confuses many people. They think something has gone wrong, but nothing has gone wrong. What is happening now is not a setback. It is the next layer revealing itself. When the nervous system starts to settle, stillness becomes possible. And when stillness becomes possible, everything that once depended on noise starts to surface. There is a quiet moment when stimulation drops away and you are left with yourself. No distractions, no roles to perform, no urgency, just presence. And instead of freedom, a subtle fear can arise, a tightness, a sense that something is missing. This reaction is not random, it is learned, and understanding it changes everything. Stillness feels threatening before it feels liberating because the mind and body have been trained to associate movement with safety. For years, maybe decades, stimulation has been used as protection. Thinking, planning, scrolling, worrying, doing. These are not just habits, they are strategies. They keep deeper sensations out of awareness. They keep unresolved feelings buried. They keep the system busy enough to avoid what feels unknown. When stillness removes stimulation, the protective layer dissolves, and what remains is unfamiliar territory. The nervous system asks, "Who am I without all this movement?" The mind asks, "What happens if I stop managing everything?" These questions are not spoken. They are felt. This is why stillness can feel like a loss of control. The structures that once provided orientation begin to fade. The constant commentary quiets. The usual reference points weaken. For a system used to being guided by thought and activity, this can feel like falling. But this falling is not into danger. It is into depth. The resistance that appears in stillness is not an enemy, it is a threshold. It marks the edge between what is familiar and what is real. Most people never cross this edge. They interpret discomfort as a sign to escape. They reach for stimulation, they return to noise, and the doorway remains unopened. The fear is rarely dramatic. It often shows up as boredom, restlessness, irritation, sleepiness, a vague sense of unease. These are socially acceptable ways to avoid stillness. But beneath them is something more honest, a fear of meeting what has been avoided. When stimulation disappears, old emotional patterns lose their cover. Feelings that were postponed begin to knock. Grief that never had space, anger that was swallowed, loneliness that was masked by activity. These are not created by stillness. They are revealed by it. This revelation can feel threatening because the system equates exposure with danger. In the past, feeling these things may have been overwhelming, so the body learned to stay busy instead. Stillness interrupts this strategy. The important thing to understand is this: the threat is not the stillness, the threat is the belief that what arises cannot be handled. This belief formed long ago, often before language. It is stored as tension, not as memory. Stillness brings awareness to this tension. Awareness feels like risk because it removes distance. There is no buffer. This is why people often say they feel worse before they feel better. It is not that stillness creates suffering. It removes the avoidance of suffering, and avoidance has been mistaken for stability. There is a strange paradox here. The same stillness that eventually liberates you first confronts you. It shows you the cost of constant stimulation. It reveals how much energy has been spent holding things together. This confrontation is not punishment, it is honesty. Resistance is the nervous system saying, "This is new." It is not saying, "This is wrong." If you stay with this resistance gently, without forcing calm or escaping, something shifts. The body begins to learn that the feared sensations do not destroy you. They move, they peak, they pass. This learning is powerful. It rewrites the old equation that equated feeling with danger. This is why stillness is a doorway. The resistance marks the threshold. On one side is the known world of distraction and control. On the other side is a deeper freedom that does not depend on keeping things away. Many people expect liberation to feel pleasant immediately. They expect peace to feel like relief, but liberation often begins as disorientation. The old ways stop working. The new ways are not yet trusted. This in-between feels unstable. This instability is not chaos, it is reorganization. Think of how the body feels when a long-held tension finally releases. There can be trembling, weakness, a strange emptiness. These are signs of recalibration. Stillness triggers a similar process internally. As resistance softens, another fear may appear, a fear of disappearing. When the usual mental noise quiets, the sense of being someone doing something can weaken. This can feel like losing identity. The mind asks, if I am not thinking all the time, who am I? This fear is understandable. Identity has been built from thought, memory, and habit. Stillness loosens their grip. But what dissolves is not you. It is the constant effort to be you. What remains is presence without strain, awareness without commentary, a sense of being that does not need constant confirmation. This feels unfamiliar at first because it is not based on effort. The reason this feels liberating later is because effort has been exhausting. Another layer of resistance comes from cultural conditioning. Productivity is valued. Stillness is misunderstood as laziness. Doing is rewarded. Being is ignored. So when you stop doing, guilt can arise, a feeling that you should be accomplishing something. This guilt is not moral, it is conditioned. Stillness challenges the belief that worth comes from activity. This challenge feels threatening because it destabilizes a deeply held story. If you allow this guilt to be present without obeying it, you begin to see through it. You realize that nothing bad happens when you rest. The world does not collapse. Your value does not disappear. This realization loosens the grip of old conditioning. Stillness also removes the illusion of control. When you are busy, it feels like you are steering life. When you are still, you see how much unfolds on its own. This can feel unsettling at first, but it is also relieving. Control has been heavy. The resistance to stillness is the last defense of a system built on effort. It is the mind and body saying, "This is how we survived." Honoring this without obeying it allows a deeper intelligence to emerge. As you pass through this doorway, stillness changes its flavor. What once felt empty begins to feel full. What once felt threatening begins to feel supportive. There is a sense of being held rather than exposed. This shift does not happen because you understand something new. It happens because the system experiences safety on the other side of fear. Experience rewrites belief. You may notice that after staying with stillness through resistance, you feel more solid, more rooted, less reactive. Not because you are suppressing reactions, but because they no longer dominate. The doorway does not remove life's difficulties. It changes how you meet them. Instead of bracing, you stay. Instead of escaping, you allow. Instead of resisting discomfort, you trust movement. This trust is the beginning of liberation. Most people turn back just before this point. They mistake resistance for failure. They think stillness is not for them. In truth, resistance is proof that something real is happening. Stillness feels threatening before it feels liberating because it dismantles the structures built to avoid pain. Liberation does not come from building better structures. It comes from discovering you no longer need them. On the other side of resistance is a quiet confidence. Not confidence in outcomes, but confidence in your ability to remain present. This confidence does not shout, it settles. And when stillness settles, it no longer feels like absence, it feels like ground. After passing through the doorway where resistance softened, something new becomes visible. The noise may be gone, the body calmer, the mind less reactive, and yet there can still be a subtle tension underneath, a sense that quiet has arrived, but peace has not fully landed. This is an important distinction. What follows now is not about making things quieter, but about understanding what it truly means to be settled. There is a kind of quiet that feels stiff. The room is silent, but inside there is pressure. Thoughts are held down, emotions are contained, the body behaves, but it does not rest. Many people mistake this for peace. It looks calm from the outside, but it requires effort to maintain. This is silence imposed, and it is fragile. Inner settlement is different. It does not need maintenance. It does not depend on conditions being perfect. It is not created by discipline or force. It happens when inner conflict dissolves on its own, not because it was defeated, but because it was understood. Silence can be achieved by control. You can stop talking, you can reduce noise, you can suppress expression. You can even slow your thoughts temporarily through effort. But none of this guarantees settlement. In fact, it can deepen conflict if it is used to avoid what is alive inside. Inner settlement begins when there is no longer a war within, no side trying to dominate another, no part of you being pushed away. It is not about silencing anything. It is about listening so fully that nothing needs to shout anymore. Many people grow up learning to silence themselves. They learn to hide anger to be accepted. They learn to bury fear to appear strong. They learn to ignore sadness to keep functioning. Over time, this creates an inner environment where silence exists, but harmony does not. The conflict is muted, not resolved. This is why silence alone can feel tense. It is like holding your breath. It looks still, but it cannot last. Inner settlement feels different in the body. The breath is natural, the chest is open, the jaw is soft. There is a sense of alignment rather than restraint. Nothing is being held back. Nothing is being pushed forward. Settlement does not mean nothing arises. Thoughts still come, emotions still move, sensations still change. The difference is that they are not met with resistance. They are allowed to complete their movement. Conflict exists when one part of experience says no to another, when thought says feeling should not be here, when fear says calm must be forced, when desire says this moment is not enough. Settlement happens when these inner negotiations end. This does not require agreement. It requires honesty. Inner settlement grows when you stop trying to arrange yourself into an ideal state. The moment you try to become calm, conflict is already present. One part of you is dissatisfied with another. Settlement comes when dissatisfaction is seen without being acted on. This is subtle. And because it is subtle, it cannot be achieved through methods designed to dominate the mind. Any approach based on winning will create losers inside. Those losers do not disappear, they wait. Silence imposed by willpower often collapses under stress. A small trigger brings back reactivity. A single challenge reveals how much tension was required to stay quiet. This is not failure, it is feedback. Inner settlement, once present, remains steady even when noise returns. Life can be loud, emotions can be strong, and still there is no inner argument about what is happening. Experience moves freely. One way to sense the difference is this. Imposed silence feels narrow. Settlement feels spacious. In imposed silence, attention is tight. It monitors, it corrects. It stays alert for disturbances. In settlement, attention is wide. It includes disturbances without being shaken by them. This difference explains why some people meditate for years, yet remain internally divided. They learn how to quiet the surface, but not how to dissolve the root of conflict. The root is not thought, it is resistance. Resistance is always effortful. Settlement is effortless, but not passive. It requires a willingness to feel what is present without manipulating it. This willingness is not resignation. It is openness without agenda. When inner conflict dissolves, it does not do so dramatically. There is no victory moment. There is a quiet recognition that fighting was unnecessary, that the energy used to resist can now rest. This resting is deep. It feels like coming into alignment with yourself, like no longer being split between who you are and who you think you should be. Silence can coexist with judgment. You can be quiet and still harsh with yourself. You can be silent and still compare. Settlement removes this inner commentary, not by stopping it, but by making it irrelevant. Judgment loses power when it is seen as just another movement, not a command. When no part of you believes it needs to be obeyed, it fades naturally. Another difference lies in time. Imposed silence is often time-bound. It lasts as long as the practice lasts. Settlement lingers. It becomes part of how you meet moments. You may notice that after genuine settlement, there is less urgency to speak. Not because speaking is wrong, but because silence is no longer empty. Words are no longer used to fill space or protect identity. They arise when they are needed. This gives communication a different quality. It becomes simpler, more precise, less reactive. Silence is no longer something you retreat into, it is something you carry. Inner settlement also changes how you relate to discomfort. In imposed silence, discomfort is an enemy that threatens the calm. In settlement, discomfort is allowed to exist without disturbing the ground. This does not mean you tolerate harm or ignore needs. It means you respond without inner struggle. Conflict dissolves when there is no longer a part of you trying to escape the present. Settlement is not agreement with everything. It is the end of arguing with what is already here. Many people believe they need to resolve all their issues to be settled. This belief keeps them chasing solutions endlessly. In truth, settlement is not about solving life. It is about stopping the internal resistance to life. Problems still arise. Decisions still need to be made, but they are met without the added layer of self-conflict. This is why settlement feels deeply restful, not because nothing happens, but because nothing is being opposed internally. Silence imposed often creates distance from life. Settlement creates intimacy. You are closer to your experience, not removed from it. This intimacy can feel vulnerable at first. There is no armor, no strategy, just presence. But this vulnerability is not weakness. It is sensitivity without fear. When inner conflict dissolves, compassion arises naturally, not as a moral choice, but as a byproduct of not being at war with yourself. When you stop fighting inside, it becomes difficult to fight outside. This is the ethical power of settlement. It does not require rules. It expresses itself through clarity. Another sign of settlement is simplicity. You feel less need to explain yourself, less need to justify your state. There is a quiet confidence that does not seek validation. Silence imposed often seeks recognition. Settlement does not care if it is noticed. As this becomes more stable, you may notice a shift in identity. You are less identified with roles, stories, and self-images. Not because they disappear, but because they are seen as functional rather than defining. Settlement does not erase personality, it removes rigidity. The body also responds differently. Muscles remain soft, even during activity. Breath remains fluid, even under pressure. These are signs that silence is no longer being enforced. Peace is embodied. This embodiment is crucial. Without it, silence stays mental. With it, settlement becomes lived. It is possible to sit quietly for hours and still be unsettled. It is also possible to be active and deeply settled. The difference is not external, it is internal coherence. Inner settlement is when nothing inside is being asked to be different, when no part is being excluded, when experience is allowed to organize itself. This does not happen all at once. It deepens over time. Each moment of honest presence contributes. Each time you choose to feel rather than suppress, to allow rather than control, settlement strengthens. Eventually, silence becomes natural, not because you are holding it, but because nothing inside is demanding noise. At this point, stillness no longer feels like something you enter. It feels like what you are resting in, even as life moves. Silence can be imposed. Inner settlement cannot. It arrives when the struggle ends, and when it arrives, it does not announce itself. It simply feels right. As inner conflict dissolves and settlement becomes natural, something quietly reveals itself. There is a clarity present, even when no thoughts are forming. Decisions seem to know themselves before you think them through. Understanding appears without effort. This is where many people become confused, because they were taught that knowing only happens through thinking. What opens now challenges that belief at its root. There is a kind of knowing that does not speak, it does not analyze, it does not compare, yet it is precise, it is responsive, it is deeply aligned with reality. This knowing arises only when the noise settles enough for it to be felt. Stillness does not remove intelligence, it reveals a deeper one. Most people associate intelligence with speed, memory, problem-solving, and verbal ability. These are useful skills, but they are not the source of wisdom. They operate after perception has already been shaped. Stillness works before that. It is an intelligence that precedes thought, not follows it. This intelligence is not passive. It is alert without strain. It sees without effort. It responds without delay. When stillness is present, there is an immediate sense of what fits and what does not. You may not be able to explain it, but it is accurate. This is not intuition as a guess. It is perception without distortion. The mind usually filters reality through preference, fear, memory, and expectation. These filters create delay and bias. Stillness removes the filters, not by force, but by making them unnecessary. When nothing is being defended, perception becomes clean. This is why stillness feels intelligent. Not because it thinks better, but because it does not interfere. Animals live closer to this intelligence. They do not overthink. They sense and respond. Their awareness is embedded in the body. Humans have this capacity too, but it becomes buried under layers of mental activity. Stillness brings it back online. This intelligence is grounded in presence. It is situational. It does not rely on stored concepts. It reads the moment directly. This makes it adaptable. Thought applies past solutions. Stillness perceives what is needed now. Many people fear this because they equate thinking with control. They worry that without constant thought, they will make mistakes. But the opposite is often true. Many mistakes happen because thought overrides perception. Stillness allows perception to lead. You may notice this in simple moments. You know when to speak and when not to. You sense when to move and when to wait. You feel when something is off before you can explain why. This is not magic. It is intelligence functioning without delay. Stillness allows information to arrive whole rather than fragmented. Thought breaks things into parts. Stillness receives patterns. This pattern recognition is subtle but powerful. It allows you to sense consequences before they unfold. This is why deeply settled people often appear wise. Not because they know more facts, but because they see clearly. Their responses are simple. Their actions are timely. They do not rush or hesitate unnecessarily. Stillness is not empty waiting. It is active receptivity. Like still water reflecting the sky, it reveals what is present without distortion. Agitated water cannot reflect clearly, neither can a restless mind. This intelligence does not compete, it cooperates. It does not dominate experience, it aligns with it. When stillness is present, action flows from understanding rather than impulse. This also explains why overthinking often leads to confusion. Too many mental movements distort the signal. Stillness clarifies by subtraction, not addition. Importantly, this intelligence cannot be claimed. The moment you try to use it as a tool, it withdraws. It functions best when there is no agenda, when presence is primary. This challenges the habit of seeking certainty through thought. Stillness does not offer guarantees, it offers attunement. You do not know everything in advance, but you know how to respond when the moment arrives. This is a different kind of confidence. Not confidence in outcomes, but confidence in responsiveness. Stillness also allows deeper understanding of others. When internal noise is low, you perceive subtle cues, tone, timing, energy. You listen beyond words. This makes communication more honest and less reactive. This intelligence is relational. It adjusts naturally. It does not cling to fixed positions. It responds to what is actually happening. In problem solving, stillness creates space for insight. Many breakthroughs occur not during effort but after it stops. The mind relaxes and a solution appears fully formed. This is not coincidence. It is stillness allowing integration. Thought works linearly. Stillness works holistically. It connects information without forcing sequence. This intelligence also knows when not to act. In a culture obsessed with action, this is misunderstood. But restraint is often the most intelligent response. Stillness recognizes when movement would create more harm. Because it is not driven by fear, stillness is patient. It waits without anxiety. This patience allows situations to reveal themselves fully before response. Stillness does not rush clarity, it allows it. Another aspect of this intelligence is ethical sensitivity. When perception is clear, harm is felt immediately. You do not need rules to tell you what is wrong. You sense misalignment in the body. This makes compassion natural, not forced. This is why moral struggle decreases as stillness deepens. You do not need to debate what is right. You feel what is right. Action follows. This intelligence is also humble. It does not assume it knows everything. It remains open. This openness keeps it accurate. Fixed conclusions dull perception. Stillness stays curious without seeking novelty. It is interested without grasping. In creativity, this intelligence is essential. Ideas emerge from stillness, not from strain. When you stop pushing for answers, deeper connections form. Creativity is not produced, it is received. This receiving requires trust. Trust that something will arise if space is allowed. Stillness cultivates this trust through experience. As this intelligence becomes more familiar, thinking changes. Thought becomes a tool rather than a master. You use it when needed and set it down when not. This balance restores mental health. You are no longer thinking to exist. You think to serve clarity. Stillness does not eliminate reasoning. It grounds it. Decisions made from stillness are simpler and more accurate because they are not burdened by unnecessary fear. This intelligence also recognizes limits. It knows when not to know. This humility prevents burnout. You stop trying to solve what is not yours to solve. In daily life, this shows up as ease. Tasks get done without inner resistance. You move through situations without constant commentary. Life feels coordinated rather than chaotic. Stillness allows intelligence to move through the body. You feel responses before you articulate them. Action becomes embodied. This embodiment is crucial. Intelligence trapped in thought is incomplete. Stillness integrates knowing with movement. Over time, you may notice that you trust yourself more. Not your opinions, but your presence. You trust that if you stay settled, the right response will come. This trust reduces anxiety. You no longer need to plan every outcome. You rely on responsiveness. Stillness is not the absence of intelligence, it is intelligence unblocked. When conceptual thought quiets, something older and wiser takes the lead. Not dramatic, not mystical, simply accurate. This is why stillness has authority without force. People feel it. It does not need to explain itself. As this intelligence becomes stable, life feels less confusing, not because answers are fixed, but because perception is clear. Stillness is not passive. It is the most refined form of knowing available to a human being. It precedes words. It precedes thought. And when trusted, it guides life with quiet precision. As stillness reveals its quiet intelligence, another process begins without announcement. You may not notice it at first. There is no insight to celebrate, no clear moment to mark. Yet something deep starts to change. Old emotional weight begins to lose its shape. What once felt sharp slowly becomes soft. What once demanded attention starts to settle on its own. This is not because you fixed anything, it is because you stopped interfering. There is a common belief that emotions must be processed through effort. Talk them out, analyze them, release them, control them, manage them. This belief comes from the mind's habit of doing. But emotions do not resolve through force. They resolve through completion. And completion happens naturally when there is space, safety, and time. Stillness provides all three. Unresolved emotions are not problems waiting to be solved. They are experiences that were never allowed to finish. At the time they arose, the system did not have enough safety or capacity to feel them fully, so they were paused, stored, held in the body as tension, patterns, and reactions. This storage is not a mistake, it is protection. But what protects us in one phase of life can burden us in another. Emotional composting begins when the system no longer needs to protect itself in the same way. When stillness is present, when attention is settled, when the nervous system remembers safety, emotions finally receive the conditions they need to complete their cycle. This is why stillness can feel emotionally active, even when nothing is happening. Beneath the surface, old material begins to move, not dramatically, quietly, like leaves breaking down into soil. Composting is a good word here. In nature, composting does not involve effort. No one forces decay. No one rushes transformation. Organic material breaks down when it is left undisturbed under the right conditions. Heat builds. Microorganisms do their work. What once was waste becomes nourishment. Emotions work the same way. When you stop interfering, when you stop labeling emotions as good or bad, when you stop trying to get rid of them or hold on to them, they begin to change form. Anger softens into clarity. Grief opens into tenderness. Fear loosens into alertness. Shame dissolves into humility. Not because you aimed for these outcomes, but because the emotional energy was allowed to reorganize. Interference interrupts this process. When you analyze emotions while they are alive, you pull them into thought. When you distract yourself, you freeze them. When you suppress them, you trap them. When you dramatize them, you prolong them. Stillness does none of this. Stillness simply stays. This staying is not passive tolerance, it is intimate presence without agenda. The emotion is allowed to be exactly what it is. No fixing, no improving, no storytelling, just sensation, movement, and energy being felt as they are. This is why emotional composting cannot happen in a rushed mind. Speed keeps emotions shallow. Depth requires slowness. Many people fear this process because they believe that if they stop interfering, emotions will overwhelm them. This fear comes from past experiences when emotions did overwhelm them. But the difference now is capacity. Stillness increases capacity. When the system is settled, emotions can move without hijacking. They arise, peak, and pass like waves. They do not define identity. They do not demand action. They are allowed to complete. Completion is the key. An emotion completes when it is fully felt without resistance and without amplification. Resistance blocks completion, amplification feeds it, stillness allows it. You may notice that when you sit in stillness, unexpected emotions surface. Sadness without a clear reason, irritation without a target, warmth followed by heaviness. These are not random. They are layers releasing in the order the system feels safe to release them. This order is intelligent. It does not follow logic. It follows readiness. Stillness respects this intelligence. It does not pry. It does not dig. It does not demand catharsis. It waits. Waiting is not inaction here. It is trust. As emotional composting continues, you may notice changes in how you react to life. Triggers lose their charge. Situations that once provoked strong reactions now pass through with less impact. This is not suppression, it is resolution. When emotional energy completes, it no longer needs to repeat itself. Many people spend years trying to understand why they react the way they do. Understanding can be helpful, but it does not dissolve stored emotion. Presence does. The body does not release emotion because you understand it. It releases emotion because it no longer needs to hold it. Stillness sends this message repeatedly. It is safe now. Over time, the emotional landscape becomes simpler, not flatter, but clearer. You still feel deeply, but feelings do not linger unnecessarily. They move through. You recover faster. You do not carry yesterday into today as heavily. This lightness is not denial, it is digestion. Emotional composting also changes memory. Memories lose emotional charge. They may still exist, but they no longer provoke the same response. The body no longer relives them. This is healing at a level thought cannot reach. This process often happens without you noticing. You may realize one day that something that used to hurt does not anymore. There was no moment of release, no big breakthrough, just quiet transformation. This is how stillness works. It does not announce its achievements. Another important aspect is that emotional composting does not require reliving trauma. It does not require storytelling. It does not require digging into the past. In fact, forcing memory can re-traumatize. Stillness allows release without reenactment. The body knows how to let go when it is ready. Stillness provides the environment. The rest happens on its own. This is why patience is essential. Emotional composting follows natural timing. Some layers release quickly, others take longer. Trusting this timing prevents harm. As unresolved emotions decompose, they do not disappear into nothing. They transform. The energy they carried becomes available for presence, available for creativity, available for connection. Many people are surprised by the vitality that returns as emotional weight lifts. Fatigue decreases, motivation increases. Not because you pushed yourself, but because energy was freed. Stillness does not make you numb, it makes you available. Another subtle shift happens. You stop identifying with emotions. You feel them fully, but you no longer become them. This creates emotional maturity. You can be sad without collapsing, angry without attacking, afraid without freezing. This maturity is not learned. It emerges when emotional composting has done its work. Stillness also changes how you relate to others' emotions. You become less reactive, less defensive, more present. Because your system is not constantly protecting itself from its own unresolved material. This creates healthier relationships without effort. Emotional composting also teaches humility. You see how much was carried unconsciously, how much behavior was driven by unprocessed emotion. This realization softens judgment, both toward yourself and others. You stop needing to be right. You start needing to be real. One of the most misunderstood aspects of this process is boredom. Emotional composting often passes through boredom. When drama fades, when old emotional loops weaken, there can be a flatness. This flatness is not emptiness, it is neutrality. It is the absence of unnecessary charge. Many people escape here. They mistake neutrality for lifelessness. But if you stay, something deeper opens, a quiet contentment, a stable presence, a sense of being okay without stimulation. This is emotional freedom. Freedom does not mean you feel good all the time. It means emotions no longer control your life. Stillness allows emotions to compost rather than accumulate. It keeps the internal environment clean and fertile. From this soil, wisdom grows naturally. You do not need to dig through your emotional past. You need to stop running from your emotional present. Stillness is enough. When interference ends, healing continues, not as an event, but as a way of being. Emotional composting becomes ongoing. Each feeling is met, each wave completes. Nothing is stored unnecessarily. This is not a technique. It is a relationship with experience. And as this relationship stabilizes, you discover something simple and profound. You are not broken. Nothing inside you needs to be fixed. Everything inside you needs space. Stillness gives that space. And in that space, what was heavy becomes nourishment. As emotional weight composts and old reactions lose their grip, a new temptation quietly appears. It feels positive, even noble, a sense that you are moving forward, becoming better, going somewhere higher. This is where many people unknowingly step into another form of movement, not physical movement, inner movement, and it can be just as distracting as noise. There is a subtle excitement that comes when suffering decreases. You feel lighter, clearer, more stable, and almost immediately the mind wants to measure it, name it, turn it into progress. This is understandable. We have been trained to value improvement, to believe that growth always looks like advancement. But in inner work, this belief often hides a deeper avoidance. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Much of what is called spiritual progress is simply refined movement, a more elegant way of not staying still. The mind loves goals, it loves stages, it loves comparing where you are now to where you were before. This creates a sense of direction. But direction implies distance. Distance implies that something is missing. And the moment something is missing, effort returns. Non-movement threatens this entire structure. Non-movement does not mean doing nothing in life. It means no longer moving away from what is here. It means not chasing a future state to validate the present. This is deeply confronting because identity has been built on becoming. When emotional composting frees energy, the system feels capable again. This capability often turns into seeking deeper states, seeking permanent peace, seeking enlightenment, seeking the next realization. This seeking feels productive, but it is often fear in disguise, fear of stopping completely. Stopping reveals truth faster than movement ever can. Movement creates a sense of continuity. It gives the mind something to hold on to. Non-movement removes reference points. There is no next step, no higher version, just this. This is why non-movement feels threatening even to sincere seekers. It removes the narrative of improvement. It removes the comfort of progress. It asks a simple but radical question. What if nothing needs to happen? The illusion of progress is seductive because it gives meaning to effort. It makes discomfort feel purposeful. It promises a payoff, but it also postpones truth, always later, always after the next breakthrough. Non-movement collapses time. There is no later. There is only what is. This does not mean stagnation. Stagnation is resistance. Non-movement is openness without direction. It is staying without agenda. In spiritual spaces, progress is often measured by experiences, visions, bliss, calm, insight. But experiences come and go. They do not define freedom. Chasing them keeps attention outward. Non-movement turns attention back to what is always present, the ground beneath experience. This ground is not exciting, it does not entertain, it does not confirm identity, it does not provide stories, and because of this, it is often ignored. But this ground does not change, it does not improve, it does not regress, it simply is. When you stop moving inwardly, you begin to see how much movement was unnecessary, how much effort was driven by discomfort with simplicity. The mind equates simplicity with lack. It says, this can't be it. So it creates projects, paths, practices, even spiritual ones. None of this is wrong, but at a certain point, it becomes avoidance. Avoidance of rest, avoidance of not knowing, avoidance of ordinariness. Non-movement exposes this avoidance. It removes the excitement. It removes the hope of arrival. It removes the identity of seeker. And what remains feels bare. This bareness is often mistaken for emptiness, but it is not empty. It is unadorned. Here, truth is not discovered. It is uncovered. Progress implies distance from truth. Non-movement reveals that distance was imagined. This does not happen through logic. It happens through exhaustion. Eventually, the system gets tired of chasing, tired of refining, tired of improving. This fatigue is not failure, it is readiness. When the desire to progress falls away, something settles, not as achievement but as relief, relief from becoming. Non-movement allows reality to meet you without filters, without interpretation, without comparison. This can feel disorienting because there is no metric, no success criteria, but there is honesty. You begin to see subtle ways movement continues, the desire to stay in pleasant states, the urge to avoid discomfort, the wish to maintain peace. Even these are movements. Non-movement includes discomfort. It does not seek to replace it. It allows it to be present without strategy. This is where truth reveals itself fastest, not through insight, but through exposure. You see what is actually happening, not what you want to be happening. This seeing is not judgmental, it is neutral, clear, direct. The illusion of progress often keeps people circling around truth without touching it. Each new understanding adds another layer, another identity, another story. Non-movement strips these layers gently, not aggressively. It does not attack belief. It makes belief unnecessary. There is also a cultural aspect to this illusion. We live in a world obsessed with growth metrics, self-improvement, optimization. This mindset leaks into spirituality. Even stillness becomes something to master. Non-movement refuses mastery. It has no hierarchy, no advanced level, no authority. This can feel threatening because it removes status. There is no one ahead, no one behind, just presence. Non-movement also reveals how much spiritual activity can be used to avoid unresolved material. Seeking higher states can bypass ordinary pain. Non-movement brings attention back to what is simple and unresolved. This is not regression, it is integration. When you stop moving inwardly, you may notice boredom again. Not the restless boredom from before, but a quiet flatness. This flatness is the absence of drama, the absence of narrative. If you stay here without trying to improve it, something stabilizes, a sense of enough, a sense of completion without accomplishment. This is deeply countercultural. There is no applause, no recognition, no sense of specialness. And yet, there is peace, not the peace of achievement, the peace of non-resistance. Non-movement does not mean life stops. Action still happens, decisions are made, growth occurs naturally, but it is no longer driven by lack. This is the key difference. Growth without lack is healthy. Progress driven by lack is endless. Non-movement reveals that what you were seeking was already present, hidden behind effort. This realization cannot be claimed. The moment you say, "I have arrived," movement returns. Non-movement is ongoing surrender. It is the willingness to not know what comes next, to not shape the future, to not measure the present. This is why it reveals truth faster. There is nothing in the way. The mind cannot stand this for long. It will try to reassert control, create meaning, create direction. This is normal. Seeing this is part of non-movement. Each time you notice the urge to move and you do not obey it, clarity deepens. This clarity is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not argue. It simply sees. Over time, the need for progress loses its grip. You stop asking, "Am I getting better?" and start resting in, "This is enough." Enough does not mean finished. It means complete. From here, action arises cleanly, not to fix yourself, not to become something, but because life moves. Non-movement reveals that truth does not require advancement. It requires honesty, and honesty only appears when you stop trying to get somewhere else. This is not the end of the path. It is the end of the illusion that there was a path to begin with. And in this ending, something very simple remains. Presence without ambition, stillness without effort, truth without movement. When the illusion of progress falls away and non-movement becomes natural, something very quiet but very powerful is revealed. It is not dramatic. It does not feel like a breakthrough. It feels like something finally stopping. A tension you did not even know you were carrying loosens. The inner voice that was always adjusting, correcting, negotiating begins to fade. What remains is not improvement. It is relief. There is a conversation that has been running inside you for most of your life. It is subtle, constant, and exhausting. It sounds like this: "I should be calmer. I should be better. I should not feel this way. I should be further along. I should be different than I am right now." This conversation rarely stops. Even spiritual practice often feeds it. Become more aware, be less reactive, let go faster, awaken deeper. This inner bargaining is so familiar that it feels like you. But it is not you. It is a habit of self-negotiation learned early as a way to survive, belong, and feel acceptable. Stillness ends this negotiation not by answering it, but by making it irrelevant. Self-negotiation exists because there is an assumed gap between who you are and who you think you should be. This gap creates effort. Effort creates tension. Tension creates identity, the identity of someone who is not yet enough. Stillness dissolves this structure at its root. When deep stillness is present, there is no future version of you to reach. There is no internal standard to meet. There is only what is here, fully allowed. And when nothing is being compared, negotiation collapses. This does not happen because you decide to accept yourself. Acceptance is still a strategy. It happens because the mind loses interest in arguing with reality. Self-negotiation is a form of movement. It is the mind constantly leaning away from the present toward an imagined improvement. Non-movement, as explored earlier, removes this lean. Stillness completes that removal. At first, the absence of self-negotiation can feel strange, almost empty. You may notice moments where you would normally correct yourself, but the correction does not come. You feel anger, and there is no inner voice saying it should not be there. You feel tired, and there is no plan to fix it. This can feel disorienting. But this disorientation is freedom. The inner bargain was never neutral. It always carried judgment. Even gentle self-improvement carries the message that something is wrong. Stillness removes the messenger. This does not make you careless or passive. In fact, it allows more honest change. When negotiation ends, action arises from clarity instead of self-criticism. Consider how exhausting it is to constantly monitor yourself, to check if you are spiritual enough, calm enough, healed enough. This monitoring fragments attention. Stillness reunifies it. In deep stillness, there is no observer trying to manage the observed. Experience is whole. Feeling and awareness are not split. This wholeness leaves no space for bargaining. Self-negotiation also relies on time. It needs a future to work toward. Stillness collapses time into presence. Without a future self to impress, the current self is enough. This does not mean stagnation. Growth still happens, but it is organic, not negotiated, like a tree growing without checking if it is tall enough. One of the most painful aspects of self-negotiation is how it turns even peace into a task. You start measuring calm, tracking stillness, judging meditation. Stillness ends this by revealing that peace is not an achievement. It is the absence of inner resistance. Resistance fuels negotiation. When resistance dissolves, negotiation has nothing to work with. You may notice that in deep stillness, language itself feels unnecessary. The mind is not narrating experience. Without narration, there is no script for self-improvement. This silence is not imposed. It is the natural outcome of no longer arguing with what is happening. Many people fear this because they believe without self-negotiation they will become lazy or irresponsible. But self-negotiation is not the source of integrity. Clarity is. When stillness is present, you naturally see what needs to be done. You do not need to pressure yourself. Action arises without inner conflict. Another layer of negotiation dissolves around identity. Labels such as healed, awakened, broken, or unworthy lose meaning. Stillness does not support fixed identity, it supports presence. Without identity maintenance, there is tremendous energy freed. Energy that was spent on managing an image returns to being. This being is simple, ordinary, quiet, and deeply satisfying. Self-negotiation is also the source of inner shame. Shame thrives on comparison. Stillness removes the comparison field. Without comparison, shame cannot survive. This does not mean you ignore harm or responsibility. It means you respond without self-attack. Accountability without self-negotiation is clean. There is no drama. Another important shift is that stillness ends spiritual bargaining. The deal that says, if I practice enough, I will finally be okay. Stillness reveals that you were okay before the deal was made. This realization can be unsettling. The seeker identity collapses. The effort identity dissolves. What remains feels unremarkable, and yet it is deeply peaceful. Stillness does not reward effort. It reveals effort as unnecessary. The end of self-negotiation also changes how you relate to emotions. You no longer ask if you should feel them. You feel them. They come and go without commentary. This simplicity accelerates emotional integration without effort. You also stop negotiating with thoughts. Thoughts appear, but there is no attempt to replace them with better ones. This ends mental exhaustion. When negotiation stops, presence becomes stable. Not because you are holding it, but because nothing is pulling you away. This stability feels grounded, not elevated. It is not a high. It is a home. Self-negotiation is learned through external pressure, parents, culture, education. Stillness is unlearned. It reveals what was always there before conditioning. As this becomes clear, compassion deepens. You see how much suffering comes from people negotiating with themselves endlessly, trying to become acceptable, trying to fix their existence. Stillness ends this suffering in you, and from that ending, kindness flows naturally. The end of self-negotiation does not mean you stop reflecting. It means reflection is no longer weaponized. Insight becomes gentle, honest, useful. There is also humor here. You may notice how absurd the inner bargaining was, how much energy was spent trying to be different instead of being present. This humor is healing. It dissolves seriousness. Seriousness is a key ingredient in self-negotiation. Stillness lightens identity. You are no longer invested in maintaining a certain state. States come and go. You remain. This remaining is not passive. It is awake, clear, responsive. The deepest relief of stillness is this: you no longer need to justify your existence. You no longer need to earn peace. You no longer need to negotiate your right to be here. You are here, and that is enough. This is why stillness feels deeply settled. There is nothing left to bargain with, no internal contract to fulfill, no future self to become. Life continues. Challenges arise, emotions move, decisions are made, but the background tension of "I should be different" is gone. What replaces it is quiet dignity, a sense of being aligned with yourself. Not perfect, not finished, but whole. Stillness does not make you better. It makes you real. And in that reality, self-negotiation ends because there is no longer a self to improve, only life unfolding through presence. When self-negotiation dissolves, there is a deep relief. No more fixing, no more becoming, just presence. And yet, even here, something quiet can remain unnoticed. It does not speak loudly. It does not argue. It does not demand. It hides inside calmness itself. This is where honesty deepens again, not to create doubt, but to reveal truth. There is a version of the ego that does not look like ego. It does not brag. It does not dominate. It sits quietly. It meditates. It observes. It speaks softly about peace and presence. And because it feels calm, it often goes unquestioned. This ego is subtle. It survives by disguising itself as stillness. The ego is not just loud ambition or insecurity. At its core, ego is identification. Identification with anything that says, this is me or this is mine. And even calm can become an identity, especially calm. When someone experiences stillness, relief follows. Suffering decreases. Reactivity softens. Life feels easier. And almost without noticing, the mind forms a new reference point. I am someone who is calm. I am someone who is aware. I am someone who has gone beyond. This is not arrogance. It is habit. The ego does not disappear when suffering ends. It adapts. It becomes refined. It trades noise for quiet, drama for depth. It learns the language of spirituality and speaks it fluently. This is why some people can feel peaceful yet rigid, calm yet defensive, present yet subtly superior. The ego has not left. It has simply changed clothes. The danger here is not moral, it is perceptual. When the ego hides inside calmness, truth stops deepening. The system believes it has arrived, and arrival freezes inquiry. Genuine stillness does not freeze, it remains open. The subtle ego wants to protect the state it has found. It wants to maintain peace. It wants to avoid disturbance. This creates tension. Not obvious tension, but a quiet guarding. The moment calm must be protected, it is no longer free. This guarding shows up in subtle ways. Discomfort is avoided politely. Difficult emotions are bypassed with awareness. Conflict is dismissed as unconsciousness. Stillness becomes a shield. This is not bad intention. It is fear. Fear of losing what was hard won. But real stillness cannot be lost. Only states can. The ego thrives on states. It identifies with them. It says, this is who I am now. Genuine stillness is not a state. It is the absence of identification with states. This difference matters. A calm ego seeks consistency. It wants experience to match its image. When life disrupts that image, irritation appears, judgment appears, withdrawal appears. Genuine stillness does not require consistency. It allows disruption without defense. One way to recognize the subtle ego is to notice reactivity to being challenged. When calmness is questioned, when understanding is not acknowledged, when insight is not mirrored, does tension arise? That tension is not failure, it is information. The ego feels threatened when its identity is exposed. Another sign is the need to teach prematurely, to explain, to correct, to guide. Sharing wisdom can be natural, but when it comes with a need to be seen as wise, ego is present. Stillness does not need to prove itself. The subtle ego also loves comparison, not loud comparison, but quiet sorting, more aware than, less reactive than, further along than. These comparisons may never be spoken, but they shape perception. Genuine stillness does not compare. Comparison requires reference points. Stillness rests without reference. The most deceptive aspect of the meditating ego is sincerity. It truly believes it is aligned, and because it feels peaceful, it assumes peace is complete. But peace that avoids truth is fragile. Genuine stillness exposes the subtle ego not through confrontation, but through inclusion. It does not try to get rid of ego. It sees it clearly. When stillness deepens beyond identity, even the desire to be still is seen. Even the wish to remain calm is noticed. Nothing is exempt from awareness. This is where freedom expands again. The ego can meditate for decades. It can observe thoughts. It can cultivate calm. It can experience insight. None of these threaten it unless identification is questioned. Identification dissolves when awareness turns on itself without agenda. This does not happen through effort. It happens through honesty. At some point, there is a quiet recognition. Even this calm is being watched. Even this awareness is known. And what knows, it is not personal. This recognition does not create fireworks. It creates humility. The ego does not like humility, not humility as an idea, but humility as a lived absence of specialness. Stillness brings this naturally. When genuine stillness is present, there is no one claiming it. Calm exists, but no owner can be found. Awareness is there, but no observer stands apart. This is deeply unsettling to the ego, because the ego survives by being someone. The subtle ego also resists ordinariness. It prefers refined experiences, spaciousness, depth, silence, but genuine stillness embraces the ordinary fully. Noise, mess, emotion, confusion, nothing is excluded. Exclusion is ego, inclusion is stillness. You can notice this in daily life. When something unpleasant arises, does awareness open to it or subtly step back? Does calm stay present, or does it withdraw to protect itself? Genuine stillness stays. Another place the subtle ego hides is in spiritual language. Words like awareness, presence, non-attachment can become shields. They explain away discomfort instead of meeting it. Stillness does not explain, it feels. The ego loves understanding. Stillness loves truth. Understanding can be collected. Truth dissolves the collector. This is why deep stillness eventually feels naked. There is nothing to stand on, no identity to maintain, no position to hold, just openness. This openness can feel vulnerable. Without the identity of the calm one, who are you? Without the story of awakening, what remains? What remains is not a void. It is simple being. The ego wants to stay relevant. It will try to reassert itself, even now, even here. Seeing this is not a problem. Fighting it strengthens it. Seeing it dissolves it. Genuine stillness does not oppose ego. Opposition creates duality. Stillness reveals ego as another movement, another appearance, not a center. When this is seen clearly, something relaxes even further. There is no longer a need to be free of ego. There is no longer a project. Freedom deepens through non-interest. This non-interest is not apathy. It is the absence of investment. Ego appears. Ego disappears. Neither matters. This is where stillness becomes truly unshakable, not because nothing arises, but because nothing is defended. The meditating ego collapses when no one is trying to meditate. Stillness is no longer something you do. It is what remains when doing falls away. At this depth, calm is no longer special, it is natural. Disturbance is no longer threatening, it is included. There is a quiet equality between states. Peace and discomfort are both allowed. Awareness does not lean toward one or away from the other. This is genuine stillness. It does not need recognition. It does not need validation. It does not need to last. And because it does not need anything, it remains. The subtle ego is exposed not by effort, but by truth that includes everything, even the desire to be beyond ego. When that desire dissolves, stillness stands alone, not as an achievement, not as an identity, but as reality, unobstructed. And in this, calm is no longer something you have. It is simply how life is met. When the subtle ego loosens its grip and calm is no longer owned, something unexpected becomes noticeable. Stillness does not feel light. It does not feel airy or distant. It does not feel like floating above life. Instead, it feels solid, grounded, present in a way that has substance. This surprises many people because they were taught to associate peace with lightness and transcendence. What reveals itself now is different. Stillness has weight. There is a common image of calm as something soft and thin, like mist or space. This image comes from the mind's tendency to escape upward when things get quiet. But genuine stillness does not lift you away from life. It drops you into it, fully, firmly, without wobble. Weight here does not mean heaviness in the sense of burden. It means density, presence that has mass, a sense of being anchored rather than drifting. When stillness is real, you feel yourself here, not hovering somewhere above your experience. This grounded quality is one of the clearest signs that stillness has moved beyond thought. Thought is light and quick. It jumps, it skips, it floats between ideas. Stillness settles into the body. It has gravity. You can feel this gravity physically. The body feels more connected to the ground. Movements are slower, not from tiredness, but from precision. The feet feel real. The spine feels supported. Breathing happens lower, deeper. There is a sense of being held by the earth rather than suspended in effort. Many people chase lightness because lightness feels like relief from pain. It feels like escape. But escape is not freedom. It is avoidance in a refined form. Weight brings honesty. Stillness with weight does not bypass discomfort. It meets it directly. Because it is grounded, it can contain intensity without collapsing. This is why weight equals stability. Think about how unreliable something weightless can be. It is easily blown around, easily disturbed. True stillness is not easily disturbed. It stays, it absorbs, it holds. This holding is not tension. It is capacity. When stillness has weight, emotions can move without overwhelming the system. Sensations can be strong without causing reaction. Life can be loud without shaking the ground. This grounded stillness comes from full inclusion of the body, not just awareness in the head, but presence throughout the entire physical form. Many spiritual approaches accidentally separate awareness from the body. They emphasize observation without embodiment. This creates lightness without depth. Depth comes from weight. Weight appears when awareness descends, not downward as a direction, but inward as a commitment to being fully here, fully in sensation, fully in contact. When stillness is light and floaty, it often avoids density. It avoids grief, anger, desire, fear. It prefers spaciousness. But spaciousness without density is incomplete. Weight allows spaciousness to be lived, not imagined. Another reason stillness has weight is because it carries truth. Truth is not abstract. It lands. It has impact. It changes posture. It changes tone. It changes how you stand in the world. When someone is deeply settled, you can feel it. They do not rush. They do not fidget. They do not fill space unnecessarily. There is a sense of gravity around them, not intimidation, authority without force. This authority does not come from confidence or certainty. It comes from being unshakable because there is nothing to protect. Weight comes from contact with reality. When you stop escaping into ideas, when you stop floating in concepts, reality presses back. This pressure is grounding. It anchors attention. Stillness with weight is intimately connected to responsibility. Not responsibility as duty, but as responsibility. The ability to respond fully to what is here. Light stillness often withdraws, it dissociates politely. Weighted stillness stays engaged. This is why people who embody stillness deeply are often very practical. They deal with real things: money, health, relationships, conflict. They do not live in abstraction. Stillness does not remove you from the world. It gives you the weight to stand in it. Weight also shows up as patience, not forced patience, but natural steadiness. Time does not press as hard. Urgency softens. There is room to wait without anxiety. Anxiety is light and fast. It lifts attention away from the present. Weight brings attention back down. Stillness with weight does not need to be protected. It can be challenged. It can be tested. It does not break easily. This is why grounded stillness can coexist with strong emotions. Anger can arise without violence. Sadness can arise without collapse. Joy can arise without clinging. Weight provides containment. Another important aspect is that weight dissolves fantasy. Fantasy thrives in lightness. It floats in what could be. Weight anchors you in what is. This anchoring can feel disappointing at first. The mind wants transcendence. It wants specialness. Weight offers ordinariness, reality as it is. But ordinariness, when fully inhabited, is deeply peaceful. Weight also changes how you speak. Words come slower. Fewer words are needed. Silence is comfortable. Speech feels intentional rather than automatic. This is not restraint. It is economy. Stillness with weight does not rush to respond. It listens completely. And because it listens, responses are accurate. Weight is also connected to humility. Lightness can create subtle superiority, floating above problems, being beyond emotions. Weight keeps you equal, human, present. This humility is not self-diminishing, it is self-honest. Another sign of weighted stillness is endurance. It lasts, not as a state to hold on to, but as a baseline. Stress may disturb the surface, but the depth remains intact. Light stillness often collapses under pressure. Weighted stillness absorbs pressure. This absorption is not numbness, it is strength without hardness. Weight also brings warmth, not excitement, but quiet warmth, a sense of aliveness that is steady rather than sharp. This warmth comes from being fully in the body. When awareness includes the heart, the belly, the limbs, stillness feels alive rather than distant. Many people confuse numbness with peace. Numbness is light and empty. Weighted stillness is full. Weight allows grief to complete, desire to be felt, fear to move. Without weight, these experiences float unresolved. Grounded stillness lets life pass through fully. There is also a moral dimension here. Weighted stillness naturally carries care. You feel the impact of your actions. You feel the presence of others. This sensitivity guides behavior without rules. Light stillness can detach. Weighted stillness connects. Connection requires density. Contact requires weight. Stillness has weight because it includes everything. Nothing is pushed away. Nothing is lifted out. Everything is allowed to settle into its place. This settling creates coherence. Mind, body, emotion, and environment align. This alignment feels stable, trustworthy. When you are grounded in this way, you stop looking for escape. You stop seeking higher states. You stop chasing lightness. You realize that freedom is not floating away from life. It is standing fully in it. Stillness with weight does not promise bliss. It promises truth. And truth, when embodied, is peaceful. This peace does not shimmer. It does not glow. It holds. It holds you when things fall apart. It holds you when nothing is happening. It holds you when emotions surge. This holding is what makes stillness reliable. Weight is what allows stillness to be lived, not just experienced. As this becomes clear, the desire for transcendence fades. You no longer want to rise above life. You want to meet it. Stillness meets life by being fully here. Dense, grounded, present. This is why stillness has weight, because it carries reality without escaping it. And in carrying reality, it becomes something you can stand on. Not an idea, not a feeling, a foundation. As stillness settles into the body with weight and gravity, another shift begins quietly in the background. It is not dramatic. You may not even notice it at first, but something that once felt heavy starts to loosen its grip. Time. Not clock time, not schedules or dates, but the inner sense of being pulled backward and forward. The mind stops traveling as much. And in that stopping, something deeply liberating is revealed. There is a strange exhaustion many people live with that has nothing to do with how much they do. It comes from constantly carrying the past and rehearsing the future. Even in moments of rest, the mind is rarely here. It is remembering, regretting, replaying, or it is planning, worrying, preparing. This movement feels so normal that it goes unnoticed, but it is one of the main sources of inattention. Stillness changes this, not by forcing the mind to stay in the present, but by dissolving the reason it was leaving in the first place. Psychological time is not the same as practical time. Practical time is useful. It helps you show up, plan, build, and care for responsibilities. Psychological time is different. It is the sense that something from the past defines you now, or that something in the future is needed for you to be okay. This kind of time is emotional, and it is heavy. When stillness has weight, when the body is settled and awareness is grounded, psychological time begins to collapse on its own. This collapse does not feel like time stopping. It feels like time loosening. The grip of memory softens. The urgency of anticipation fades. You are still aware of yesterday and tomorrow, but they no longer dominate your inner space. This is important. Many people try to be present as a technique. They repeat phrases. They redirect attention. They force focus on breath or sensation. This often creates more tension because it turns presence into another task. Stillness works differently. It removes the engine that drives time travel. The engine is inner conflict. When there is conflict inside, the mind escapes the present. It goes to the past to find explanations or blame. It goes to the future to find solutions or hope. When conflict dissolves, there is no reason to leave. This is why settled awareness feels timeless without effort. You may notice moments where you are simply here, and time feels irrelevant, not gone, but unimportant. You are not trying to hold the moment. You are not afraid of it passing. You are just in it. This is not a peak experience. It is a natural state that returns when effort falls away. Stillness collapses psychological time by removing identity from memory and hope. The past no longer needs to be defended or corrected. The future no longer needs to be secured. Without these pressures, the mind rests. Rest is not inactivity. It is the absence of inner urgency. When urgency fades, time expands. A few minutes feel full, a simple task feels complete. You are not rushing ahead mentally while the body lags behind. This alignment is deeply soothing. Another way to sense this shift is noticing how memory changes. Memories may still arise, but they feel lighter, less personal, less charged. They do not pull you back into old emotions as strongly. This is because awareness is no longer anchored to them. Similarly, thoughts about the future may still appear, but they do not create anxiety in the same way. They are considered, then released. They do not hook into fear. This is not detachment, it is integration. When awareness is settled, it is rooted in what is actually happening now. Sensation, contact, breath, sound. Not as objects of focus, but as lived reality. From this reality, the past and future are seen as ideas rather than destinations. Ideas lose power when they are seen clearly. Stillness does not fight memory. It does not reject planning. It simply does not confuse them with life itself. This clarity brings a surprising sense of freedom. You realize how much energy was spent living elsewhere. How much attention was invested in stories rather than experience. As psychological time collapses, identity softens. You are less defined by what happened to you or what might happen. You feel more like a living presence than a story unfolding. This can feel unfamiliar. Many people are attached to their narrative. It gives meaning, direction, explanation. Stillness does not erase narrative, but it stops living inside it. You still have a story. You just do not live there anymore. Living here changes everything. Tasks become simpler. Conversations become more direct. Listening improves because you are not anticipating your response. You hear what is actually being said, not what it reminds you of. Emotions also move differently. Without the past reinforcing them and the future amplifying them, emotions are shorter-lived. They rise and fall without accumulating layers. This is why settled awareness feels light in a grounded way. Not floating, but unburdened. Time pressure decreases. You stop feeling like you are always behind or about to fall behind. There is enough time because there is no internal race. This does not mean you become slow or unproductive. In fact, efficiency often improves. When attention is not split across timelines, action becomes precise. One thing at a time happens fully. Stillness also changes how you experience aging. Without constant reference to past youth or future decline, the present body is simply lived. Sensations are felt without commentary. This reduces suffering. Fear of the future loses its grip when the mind is no longer rehearsing it constantly. This does not mean ignoring reality. It means meeting reality as it comes, not before it arrives. Another subtle shift is that waiting becomes easier. Waiting without inner commentary feels different. You are not filling the space with impatience or distraction. You are just here while time passes. This is a profound form of freedom. The collapse of psychological time also affects regret. Regret needs a solid past self to attack. When identity loosens, regret softens. Lessons remain. Self-punishment fades. This brings forgiveness, not as a decision, but as a natural outcome of no longer living in the past. Stillness allows experience to complete itself in real time. There is no backlog, nothing waiting to be processed later. This immediacy is not intensity. It is simplicity. Many people fear this because they believe without psychological time, motivation will disappear. But motivation driven by fear and lack is not the only kind. There is a quieter motivation that arises from clarity and care. This motivation is not urgent, it is steady. Stillness reveals that presence is not fragile. It does not need to be maintained. It reappears naturally when interference stops. The more settled awareness becomes, the less effort is needed to stay here. Presence is not something you hold, it is something you stop leaving. The collapse of time is not an event, it is a gradual shift in orientation. You stop living in reference and start living in contact. Contact with what is. This contact feels trustworthy. You know where you are, not in a story, not in a projection. Here. As this stabilizes, fear of missing out dissolves. There is nowhere else to be, nothing else to catch up to. You are no longer late for your life. Stillness does not freeze time, it frees you from it. Time continues to move, days pass, seasons change, but psychologically, you are no longer being dragged along. You walk with time rather than being chased by it. This is deeply settling. It brings a sense of sufficiency to each moment. Even ordinary moments feel complete, not exciting, but whole. This wholeness is what the mind was searching for in the future. Stillness reveals it here. Without trying to be present, presence becomes natural. Without effort, awareness stays where life is actually happening. This is the quiet miracle of settled awareness. Not that time stops, but that you stop being divided by it. And in that unity, life feels simple again. As the pull of past and future loosens and time no longer tugs at the mind, another quiet truth becomes visible. Stillness is not fragile. It does not depend on holding anything in place. It does not require effort to maintain. It is stable in a way that feels natural, almost physical. This is where stillness stops feeling psychological and starts feeling structural, like something balanced from the inside. There is a deep relief when you realize that peace does not have to be managed. Many people believe calm is something you must protect, defend, or recreate. That belief alone creates tension. Inner stability works by a different principle. It does not come from pushing forces away. It comes from forces meeting each other fully and cancelling out on their own. This is why stillness feels solid rather than strained. Think of how balance works in the physical world. A structure stands not because one side is overpowering the other, but because forces are evenly distributed. When weight is balanced, there is no need for tension. When forces oppose each other equally, movement stops naturally. The same principle applies inside. Inner instability comes from uneven forces. Desire pulling one way, fear pulling another, memory dragging backward, hope pulling forward, control trying to dominate uncertainty. When these forces are active and unresolved, the system feels restless. Stillness appears impossible. Control tries to solve this by suppressing some forces and strengthening others. Calm the fear, increase discipline, focus harder, think more positively. This creates temporary order, but it is rigid, like forcing an object to stay still with pressure. The pressure must be maintained or collapse follows. Inner equilibrium is different. No force is suppressed, no force is amplified. Everything is allowed to express fully until it finds its natural limit. When opposing forces meet without interference, they neutralize each other. This neutralization is not passive. It is dynamic balance. For example, when desire is allowed to be felt without acting on it or judging it, and fear is allowed to be felt without avoiding it, something interesting happens. The two forces meet. Desire wants movement, fear wants protection. When neither is resisted, the energy between them settles. The urge dissolves without decision. Stability emerges. This is how stillness forms naturally. The mind often tries to stabilize itself by choosing sides. Be more positive, be less emotional, be more disciplined. These choices create imbalance. One force wins temporarily, but the others remain active underneath. This is why controlled calm feels brittle. Stillness that comes from equilibrium feels relaxed. There is no inner leaning, no pressure, no holding. This is also why true stillness can coexist with strong sensations. Sensation itself is not destabilizing. Resistance to sensation is. When sensation is allowed to exist fully, it completes its movement. When movement completes, equilibrium returns. Inner stability is not achieved by eliminating movement. It is achieved by allowing movement to finish. This is a crucial shift in understanding. Stillness is not the absence of forces, it is the balance of them. You may notice that when you stop trying to calm yourself, calm arrives more easily. When you stop trying to be balanced, balance appears. This is not paradox, it is physics applied inwardly. Effort creates force. Force creates imbalance. Balance requires absence of forceful interference. This does not mean passivity, it means sensitivity. Sensitivity allows you to feel when forces are present. Awareness allows them to move. Non-interference allows them to settle. This process feels intelligent because it is. It follows natural law rather than mental strategy. Inner equilibrium also explains why stillness deepens over time without effort. Each time forces are allowed to meet and resolve, the system learns trust. It stops bracing. It stops preparing for imbalance. This learning becomes embodied. Over time, the baseline shifts. The nervous system expects balance rather than tension. This expectation itself stabilizes the system. This is not conditioning. It is unconditioning. The mind often believes it must constantly adjust to maintain stability. This belief comes from living in imbalance for so long that tension feels normal. When equilibrium becomes familiar, adjustment becomes unnecessary. Stillness then feels self-sustaining. Another important aspect of inner equilibrium is that it does not depend on circumstances. External forces may change, life events may pull in different directions, but internally, the system remains balanced because it is not clinging to one side. This flexibility is key. Rigid systems break under pressure. Balanced systems adapt. Stillness that comes from equilibrium does not collapse when emotions arise. Emotions are forces too. When they are allowed to express without suppression or indulgence, they balance themselves. Anger meets clarity. Sadness meets acceptance. Fear meets presence. Joy meets grounding. Each pair finds its own resolution. This is why inner stability feels alive rather than static. Static calm is dead. Dynamic balance is living. You may notice that decisions become easier in this state, not because you are certain, but because there is no internal tug-of-war. When forces are balanced, direction reveals itself naturally. This direction is not imposed. It emerges. Inner equilibrium also changes how you relate to conflict with others. When your own forces are balanced, external opposition does not destabilize you. You can listen without defensiveness, respond without overreaction, disagree without collapse. This is strength without hardness. Another sign of equilibrium is the absence of urgency. Urgency is a force pulling forward. When nothing is pulling, there is space. Space allows clarity. This does not mean delay. It means timing is accurate. Inner stability also changes how effort is experienced. Effort becomes functional rather than compensatory. You act when action is needed and rest when it is not. There is no overcompensation. Overcompensation is always a sign of imbalance. The physics of inner stability also explains why forcing stillness never works. Force creates equal and opposite force. The mind pushes down thoughts. Thoughts push back. The result is tension. Allowing thoughts without engagement removes the opposition. Thoughts pass. Stillness remains. This is not resignation. It is alignment with natural movement. Another subtle aspect is that equilibrium dissolves identity-based struggle. Identity creates fixed points. Fixed points create imbalance when reality moves. When identity softens, movement does not create stress. You are not defending a position. You are responding to life. This responsiveness feels free because it is not preloaded with tension. Inner equilibrium is also the reason why stillness feels trustworthy. You do not need to monitor it. You do not need to maintain it. It maintains itself as long as interference is absent. Interference returns when control returns. This is why humility is essential. The moment you think, I have found balance, effort returns. Balance is not something you have. It is something that happens when you stop trying to have it. This humility is not self-diminishing. It is realistic. You begin to see that peace is not fragile. It does not need protection. It needs space. Space allows forces to move. Movement allows resolution. Resolution creates stability. This cycle is natural. Inner equilibrium also reveals why struggle feels heavy. Struggle is opposing force against force. It creates friction. Friction creates heat. Heat exhausts the system. Stillness removes friction. Life still has movement. But movement flows rather than grinds. This flow does not feel exciting. It feels right. Over time, you may notice that you trust life more, not because outcomes are guaranteed, but because you trust your capacity to remain balanced within change. This trust reduces fear. Fear thrives on imbalance. Equilibrium dissolves it. Another quiet shift is that you stop trying to hold on to stillness. Holding is a force. Letting go allows balance. Stillness stays when nothing is holding it. This understanding transforms practice. Practice is no longer about achieving calm. It is about noticing interference and releasing it. Release is simpler than control. The physics of inner stability show that peace is not something added to life. It is what remains when opposing forces stop fighting. Nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing needs to be removed. Nothing needs to be improved. Everything needs to be allowed to meet. When forces meet fully, they cancel. When they cancel, stillness appears. This stillness is not imposed. It is inevitable. It is the natural state of a system in balance. And once felt, it is recognized as familiar, as something that was always available beneath effort. Stillness is not a fragile achievement, it is equilibrium realized, and equilibrium, once trusted, becomes the ground you stand on as life continues to move. As inner equilibrium becomes familiar, and balance no longer needs to be managed, the mind begins to behave differently. It no longer strains to figure things out. It no longer circles problems endlessly. And in this easing, something quietly arrives, not as effort, not as analysis, but as knowing. Clarity appears not while thinking harder, but after thinking has settled. There is a deep frustration many people live with. They think constantly, yet feel unsure. They analyze endlessly, yet feel confused. They search for answers, yet feel lost. This creates the belief that they are not thinking enough or not thinking correctly. But the real issue is not lack of thinking, it is too much of it. Thought is useful, but it is not the source of clarity. It is a tool that works best when guided by something deeper. Clarity emerges when the inner environment is quiet enough for perception to function properly. Just as muddy water clears when left undisturbed, the mind clarifies when it stops stirring itself. This is not a metaphor, it is a lived process. When the system is balanced, when forces cancel naturally, when there is no urgency pulling awareness in different directions, perception sharpens. You see what is relevant. You sense what matters. You know what to do without needing to justify it endlessly. This knowing feels different from thought. It is immediate, whole, not built step by step. Most thinking happens in fragments. One idea leads to another. Assumptions pile up. Doubts interrupt. Clarity does not arrive this way. It arrives fully formed. This is why insight often comes in moments of rest, during a walk, in the shower, while doing nothing important. These are moments when thinking relaxes and stillness briefly returns. Stillness is not passive waiting, it is fertile ground. When stillness is present, the mind stops interfering with perception. It stops projecting expectations. It stops defending identity. It stops rehearsing outcomes. Without these distortions, reality can be seen clearly. Clarity is not something added to the mind. It is what remains when interference ends. Analysis tries to force clarity by rearranging concepts. Stillness allows clarity to arise by removing noise. This difference matters because analysis can never finish. There is always another angle, another possibility, another doubt. Stillness ends this loop by ending the need to loop. You may notice that when clarity emerges, there is no relief like, finally, I solved it. There is quiet recognition, a sense of course, no excitement, no drama. This is how you know it is real. Clarity that comes from thought often feels brittle. It needs defending. It collapses under challenge. Clarity that comes from stillness feels stable. It does not argue. It does not insist. This stability comes from alignment with reality rather than coherence of ideas. Stillness aligns the whole system. Body, emotion, and awareness are not split. This integration allows insight to land deeply, not just mentally, but physically. You feel clarity in your posture, in your breath, in your tone of voice. It is embodied. This embodiment is important. Insights that stay in the head fade quickly. Insights that land in the body change behavior naturally. Stillness creates the conditions for this landing. Another reason clarity emerges after stillness is because stillness dissolves bias. Bias is subtle preference, wanting a certain outcome, avoiding a certain truth, protecting a certain identity. Bias bends perception. When stillness deepens, preference loosens. There is less need for things to be a certain way. This neutrality allows facts to be seen clearly. This does not make you indifferent, it makes you accurate. You begin to see patterns rather than details, root causes rather than symptoms, essentials rather than distractions. Thinking often focuses on content. Stillness reveals context. Context is what gives meaning. For example, a problem may appear complex when examined through thought. Many variables, many risks, many unknowns. In stillness, the core issue becomes obvious, not because it was simplified, but because irrelevant details fell away. This falling away is not chosen. It happens naturally. Stillness also removes emotional charge from inquiry. When emotions drive thinking, clarity is distorted. Fear narrows vision. Desire exaggerates possibility. Stillness stabilizes emotion, allowing perception to open. This is why important decisions made from stillness often feel right, even if they are difficult. The clarity is not based on comfort. It is based on truth. Another subtle point is that clarity does not always arrive as an answer. Sometimes it arrives as the absence of confusion. The problem simply loses importance. The question dissolves. This can be unsettling. The mind wants answers. Stillness offers resolution without explanation. This resolution is enough. Clarity also emerges differently depending on timing. Stillness allows insight to arrive when the system is ready, not when the mind demands it. This patience prevents premature conclusions. When clarity arises prematurely through analysis, it often needs revision. When it arises from stillness, it tends to endure. This endurance is not stubbornness, it is alignment. Stillness also changes your relationship with uncertainty. You no longer rush to eliminate it. You allow it to exist until clarity naturally forms. This tolerance for not knowing is essential. It prevents false certainty. False certainty is clarity's enemy. Stillness does not promise immediate answers, it promises accurate ones. As you become familiar with this process, trust grows. You trust that if you remain settled, understanding will come. This trust reduces mental effort. You stop chasing insight. Insight comes to you. This shift changes learning itself. You listen more, you observe more, you react less. Information is absorbed rather than processed aggressively. This absorption allows deeper understanding. Stillness also improves memory in an unexpected way. Not memory of facts, but memory of meaning. You remember what matters. Details organize themselves around relevance. This makes thinking more efficient without being strained. Another important change is that clarity becomes quieter. You do not feel the need to share it immediately. You let it mature. You test it through living. Clarity that survives living is real. Stillness allows insight to integrate gradually. Not everything needs to be understood at once. Pieces fall into place over time. This organic unfolding prevents overwhelm. Stillness also reveals when clarity is not needed. Some situations do not require understanding. They require presence. Thought often oversteps. Stillness knows when to act and when to wait. This discernment is subtle but powerful. You may also notice that clarity feels less personal. It does not inflate the ego. It does not create identity. It simply functions. This is another sign that it arose from stillness rather than thought. Clarity from thought often says, "I figured it out." Clarity from stillness says nothing, it just works. Over time, you may rely less on mental strategies. Not because you reject thinking, but because you no longer depend on it for orientation. Thinking becomes a servant, not a master. This balance restores mental health. Anxiety decreases, rumination fades, confidence increases, not as certainty, but as trust in perception. Stillness does not make you smarter in a conventional sense. It makes you clearer. Clearer means fewer mistakes, fewer regrets, less second-guessing. You still reflect, you still reason, but you do so from a settled base. This base does not move easily. It is not reactive, it is receptive. Clarity emerges from this receptivity. Trying to force clarity is like trying to see clearly while shaking your head. Stillness stops the shaking. This stopping is not forced. It happens when equilibrium is trusted. As clarity becomes more consistent, life feels simpler, not easier but less confusing. Confusion comes from competing narratives. Stillness dissolves narratives. What remains is direct contact with reality. This contact does not lie. Clarity is not a special state. It is a natural consequence of a mind at rest. Rest here does not mean inactivity. It means no inner struggle. When struggle ends, perception begins. And perception, when unobstructed, is intelligent. This is why clarity emerges after stillness, not during thought. Thought rearranges what is already known. Stillness allows what is unknown to reveal itself. You do not think your way into truth. You settle into it, and when truth arrives, it does so quietly, without effort, as the obvious thing that was always waiting behind the noise. As clarity settles without effort and understanding no longer needs to be chased, something unexpected often takes its place. Not insight, not peace, not even quiet satisfaction. What appears instead feels dull, flat, and strangely uncomfortable. It has no sharp edges, no story, no urgency, and because of this, most people turn away the moment it arrives. This moment has a name most people misunderstand: boredom. Boredom is usually treated as a problem, a signal that something is wrong, something missing, something needs to be done. From early childhood, boredom is framed as failure of stimulation. You are bored, so find something, do something, distract yourself, improve the moment. This conditioning runs deep. It becomes automatic. But boredom is not a lack of life. It is a lack of interference. When stimulation drops, when thought relaxes, when emotional charge fades, the mind expects something else to replace them. Excitement, meaning, insight. When nothing replaces them, boredom arises. This boredom is not the same as restlessness. It is quieter, heavier, almost blank. And this blankness scares the mind. Why? Because boredom is the final veil before profound stillness. Up until this point, the mind has been engaged, even in spiritual practice, even in clarity. There was something to work on, something to understand, something to refine. Boredom offers nothing to engage with. There is no hook. The mind does not know how to relate to this state. It cannot improve it. It cannot analyze it. It cannot extract meaning from it. So it labels it negative and escapes. Phones come out, thoughts restart, planning returns, noise resumes, and the doorway closes. Boredom is the threshold where seeking truly ends, not because you decided to stop, but because there is nothing left to seek. This is deeply uncomfortable for the ego. The ego survives through engagement, through relevance, through movement. Boredom threatens its existence by offering nothing to do. This is why boredom feels heavy. Not because it is empty, but because it strips away momentum. Momentum has been mistaken for aliveness. When momentum stops, the mind panics. Most people confuse boredom with depression. They are not the same. Depression has emotional weight, hopelessness, self-judgment. Boredom, in this context, is emotionally neutral. It is simply the absence of stimulation. This neutrality feels unbearable to a system addicted to intensity. Modern life trains the nervous system to expect constant input. Notifications, media, tasks, even self-improvement becomes stimulation. When all of this quiets, the nervous system feels exposed. Boredom is the nervous system asking, "What now?" If you answer with distraction, the old loop continues. If you do not answer, something else happens. When boredom is allowed without trying to escape it or fix it, it begins to change. At first it feels flat, like nothing is happening. Time may feel slow, the body may feel slightly heavy, the mind may complain quietly. This phase tests patience, but boredom is not static. It is a process. If you stay, boredom deepens. It stops feeling dull and starts feeling spacious. The heaviness softens, the flatness opens. What seemed empty reveals subtle texture. This is the moment most people never reach. Because boredom demands nothing. It exposes everything. It exposes the addiction to stimulation, the fear of simplicity, the discomfort with being without narrative, the habit of escaping quiet. It also exposes a deeper truth, that the mind does not actually need constant engagement to function, that awareness does not collapse without content, that presence does not require excitement. This realization does not arrive as insight. It arrives as settling. The boredom becomes stillness, not the stillness of effort, not the stillness of control, but the stillness of no longer needing to do anything with the moment. This stillness feels ordinary, almost disappointingly so. There is no bliss, no fireworks, no revelation, and yet there is deep peace. This peace is not interesting, and that is why it is real. The mind is drawn to what is interesting because interest keeps identity alive. Profound stillness does not feed identity, it dissolves it quietly. Boredom is the last defense of the mind against this dissolution. The mind says, "This is pointless, this is a waste of time, nothing is happening." These thoughts are not wrong. They are the ego's final protest. If you believe them, movement resumes. If you see them and do not obey, they fade. What remains is presence without agenda. In this presence, time feels different. Not exciting, not slow, simply irrelevant. You are not waiting for something to happen. You are not hoping for change. You are not resisting what is here. You are simply here. This simplicity is unbearable to a culture built on stimulation. It is misunderstood, undervalued, and rarely supported. Yet it is here that the deepest stillness lives. Boredom strips life of narrative. Without narrative, experience becomes direct. Sensation without story, sound without interpretation, breath without meaning. This directness is intimate. It is not numbing. It is alive in a quiet way. The irony is that boredom is avoided because it feels lifeless, but when fully entered, it reveals life without noise. This life does not demand attention. It does not perform. It does not entertain. It simply exists. Another reason boredom is misunderstood is because it does not feel productive. There is nothing to show for it, no insight to report, no experience to share. This makes it invisible in spiritual culture. But boredom is the soil where stillness roots itself. Without boredom, stillness remains shallow. It remains something you do. With boredom, stillness becomes something you are. Boredom also exposes impatience, the desire for progress, the habit of improvement. All of these surface when nothing is happening. Seeing these impulses without acting on them weakens them. This is not discipline, it is honesty. As boredom is allowed, the system relaxes even further. Muscles soften, breathing deepens, awareness spreads. There is no center pulling attention. This is profound stillness. Profound stillness is not exciting. It does not feel special. It does not announce itself. It feels like nothing. And then, slowly, it feels like everything. Not because sensation increases, but because nothing is excluded. The entire field of experience is included without preference. This inclusion brings a sense of completeness that stimulation never provides. Stimulation always points to more content, more experience, more understanding. Boredom points to enough. This is why most people never pass boredom. Enough feels threatening in a world built on lack. If this is enough, what happens to striving, to identity, to ambition? These questions are not answered. They dissolve. Life continues. Action still happens. Creativity still flows. But it is no longer driven by avoidance of boredom. Boredom becomes neutral, then invisible. It is no longer a problem to solve. It is simply a phase that passed when it was no longer resisted. Once boredom is crossed, stillness deepens in a way that cannot be undone. You realize there is nothing on the other side, no reward, no higher state, and that is the reward. The mind stops seeking because it finally understands there is nowhere else to go. This understanding is not intellectual, it is embodied. From here, stillness is not something you practice, it is the background of experience. You can be busy and still deeply still. You can be active and profoundly settled, because boredom taught you the final lesson, that life does not need to entertain you to be meaningful. Meaning arises from presence, not stimulation. Boredom is the gate most people turn away from because it looks empty, but those who stay discover it was never empty. It was quiet, and in that quiet, everything finally rests. When boredom dissolves and the mind no longer needs stimulation to feel alive, something steady begins to reveal itself, not as an experience that comes and goes, but as a background presence that does not move with circumstances. It feels quiet, reliable, and close. This is where stillness stops being a phase and becomes a refuge. There is a deep fear many people carry, often without words. A fear that peace is fragile, that calm depends on things going well, that stability can be taken away by loss, change, or uncertainty. This fear is not irrational. Most forms of security are conditional. Jobs end, relationships change, health fluctuates, plans fall apart, even inner states shift. So the question becomes unavoidable. Is there anything that remains when everything else moves? Stillness answers this question not with a promise, but with experience. At this depth, stillness is no longer something you enter. It is something you recognize as already here. It does not wait for life to be calm. It does not depend on outcomes. It does not require certainty. It remains even when the world feels unstable. This is why it becomes a refuge. External refuge always has conditions. A home can be lost, a person can leave, a belief can collapse, even confidence can disappear under pressure. External security is valuable, but it is never absolute. It cannot hold everything. Inner settlement can. This does not mean nothing hurts anymore. Pain still happens, grief still moves, fear still arises. The difference is that these experiences no longer destroy the ground beneath them. They move through a space that can hold them. This holding is not emotional numbness. It is capacity. When stillness is embodied, when it has weight and balance, when boredom has been passed and clarity no longer needs effort, the system knows something deeply reassuring. No matter what arises, there is somewhere to rest. This rest is not escape. It is presence without collapse. Loss is one of the greatest tests of refuge. Loss strips away what was relied on. It exposes dependence. When external anchors fall, inner stability is revealed clearly. Either it is there or it is not. When stillness is a refuge, loss does not remove peace. It coexists with grief. You can mourn deeply without losing yourself. Tears fall, but the ground remains. Sadness moves, but there is no panic underneath. This is not strength as endurance, it is strength as allowance. Stillness as refuge does not protect you from pain, it protects you from disintegration. Chaos is another test. Chaos disrupts order. It overwhelms systems built on predictability. In chaos, the mind searches for control. When control fails, fear rises. Inner settlement does not need order to remain intact. It does not need answers. It does not need certainty. It does not try to impose structure on what is unfolding. It stays. This staying is radical. It means not abandoning yourself when things fall apart. It means not turning against the moment. It means not needing reassurance before being present. This is why inner refuge cannot be taken away. No one can remove your willingness to stay. Uncertainty also loses its power here. Uncertainty frightens the mind because it removes prediction. But stillness does not rely on prediction. It relies on contact. When you are fully here, uncertainty becomes workable. You do not know what will happen, but you know where you are. And that is enough. This is a different kind of safety. Not safety from events, but safety within them. Stillness as refuge also changes how you relate to fear itself. Fear no longer feels like an emergency. It is recognized as sensation and energy moving through a stable field. This recognition prevents escalation. Fear passes more quickly because it is not resisted or amplified. Over time, the nervous system learns that it does not need to mobilize fully every time uncertainty appears. This learning is profound. It reduces chronic anxiety at its root. Another aspect of refuge is reliability. External refuge often fails when you need it most. Inner settlement does not fail because it does not promise protection from life. It promises presence with life. Presence does not break under pressure. It adapts. This adaptability makes stillness trustworthy. You do not need to ask if it will be there. You feel that it is. This feeling is not emotional reassurance. It is structural confidence, the sense that the ground is solid. Stillness also becomes a refuge during success, not just failure. Success can be destabilizing too. Praise, attention, achievement can pull identity outward. Stillness holds you steady when things go well, preventing inflation and loss of center. This balance keeps life from swinging wildly. Another important dimension is that inner refuge does not isolate you. It does not make you detached from others. In fact, it allows deeper connection because you are not seeking refuge in people or situations to feel okay. You meet others freely rather than needily. This freedom improves relationships. You can be close without clinging, supportive without dependency, present without expectation. Stillness as refuge also reduces the fear of aging and death. When peace depends on external conditions, the thought of loss becomes terrifying. When peace is internal, fear softens. This does not remove sadness about impermanence, it removes panic. You begin to sense that what you truly are is not threatened by change. Experiences come and go, awareness remains. This recognition is not philosophical, it is felt. Refuge also changes how you respond to crisis. Instead of collapsing or dissociating, you remain available. You can act when needed because you are not overwhelmed by internal chaos. This does not mean you always know what to do. It means you can stay present while not knowing. This is real courage. Stillness as refuge does not mean withdrawing from life. It means being rooted enough to engage fully. When things are stable, you enjoy them. When things are unstable, you endure them. In both cases, the ground is the same. This sameness brings peace that is not dependent on circumstances. Another subtle shift is that you stop seeking refuge in thought. Thought often tries to reassure. It explains, it plans, it predicts. Stillness replaces this with direct presence. Presence does not reassure with words. It reassures by being. This being is felt as calm strength. Stillness as refuge also means you no longer need to numb yourself during difficulty. You can feel pain without escaping it. This prevents secondary suffering. Secondary suffering is the struggle against pain. Stillness ends this struggle. When you no longer fight pain, pain changes. It becomes workable. It becomes human. This is not resignation. It is intimacy with life. Inner refuge also brings humility. You stop believing you can control everything. You stop blaming yourself when things go wrong. You stop demanding perfection. This humility reduces pressure. Pressure is one of the main reasons people break under stress. Inner refuge removes pressure at the core. Stillness does not promise comfort. It promises steadiness. Comfort comes and goes. Steadiness stays. This steadiness is quiet. It does not announce itself. It is noticed mostly when things shake and you do not. As this refuge becomes familiar, fear of loss decreases, not because you do not care, but because you know you will not be lost with what is lost. This knowledge is liberating. You still grieve, you still care, you still feel, but you are not erased by change. Stillness as refuge also dissolves the constant search for safety outside. You still appreciate support, resources, and relationships, but you do not cling to them as lifelines. This creates gratitude without dependency. Another important point is that inner refuge does not make you invulnerable. Vulnerability remains. But vulnerability without collapse is strength. You are open without being shattered. This openness allows life to touch you fully. Joy is richer. Sadness is deeper. Experience is more alive. Refuge here is not insulation, it is containment. Containment allows intensity without destruction. Over time, this refuge becomes so natural that you forget what it was like to not have it. Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet, ordinary way. You simply live from it. Challenges arise, and you meet them. Loss happens, and you grieve. Chaos appears, and you respond. Uncertainty remains, and you stay. Nothing special, nothing heroic, just presence that does not leave. This is why stillness is the only refuge that cannot be taken away. It does not belong to circumstances, it belongs to being. You cannot lose what you are standing in. Stillness is not protection from life, it is the place you stand while life moves. And once this is known, the deepest fear dissolves, the fear of having nowhere to go, because you realize you were never meant to go anywhere else. You are already home. When stillness becomes a refuge that does not collapse under pressure, another quiet change unfolds. You begin to notice that situations which once triggered immediate reactions no longer grip you in the same way, not because you are holding yourself back, not because you have learned better control, but because something deeper has shifted. The reaction does not fully form. It dissolves before it takes shape. This moment often feels surprising. You expect anger, but it does not arrive. You expect fear, but it passes through lightly. You expect defensiveness, but there is only clarity. This is not numbness. It is the end of emotional reactivity at its root. Most approaches to emotions focus on management. Breathe through it. Reframe the thought. Calm yourself down. Count to 10. These methods can be useful, but they treat the surface. They deal with the wave after it has already formed. Stillness works earlier. It changes the conditions that create the wave in the first place. Emotional reactivity is not caused by emotions. It is caused by identification. An emotion becomes reactive when it is interpreted as a threat, a command, or a definition of self. Anger turns into attack when it feels personal. Fear turns into panic when it feels dangerous. Sadness turns into collapse when it feels permanent. These reactions do not come from the emotion itself. They come from the story attached to it. Stillness dissolves this attachment. When awareness is settled, emotions are experienced as movements, not messages. Sensations arise, energy shifts, feelings pass. There is no rush to interpret, no need to act, no assumption that something must be done immediately. This space between sensation and story is where reactivity ends. Suppression tries to block emotion. Stillness allows emotion to complete itself. Suppression says no. Stillness says stay. This difference is crucial. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They go underground. They return later as tension, resentment, anxiety, or illness. Stillness does not bury emotion. It neutralizes it by letting it move freely. Neutralization does not mean dulling. It means removing excess charge. Charge comes from resistance. When emotion meets resistance, it intensifies. When emotion meets openness, it softens. This is why stillness feels calm without being forced. There is no inner wall, no pushing down, no pretending. There is simply space. In this space, emotions do not accumulate. They rise, peak, and dissolve, like sound fading in open air. The end of reactivity does not mean the end of feeling. In fact, sensitivity often increases. You feel more, but suffer less. This seems contradictory until you see that suffering is not caused by feeling, it is caused by clinging and resistance. Stillness removes both. Another reason reactivity ends is because stillness dissolves the sense of urgency. Reactivity feeds on urgency, the feeling that something must be handled now. The body mobilizes, the mind narrows, options disappear. In stillness, urgency fades. There is time. Even when action is required, it is clear rather than frantic. This clarity allows response instead of reaction. Reaction is automatic. Response is intelligent. Stillness does not slow you down. It refines timing. You may notice that when someone says something sharp, the familiar spike does not escalate. The sensation is felt, but it does not hook into defense. Words are heard, but they do not define you. You respond if needed, or you do not. Either way, there is no internal fallout. This is freedom. Freedom from reactivity does not come from learning what to do when triggered. It comes from no longer being triggered in the same way. This change is not achieved through willpower. Willpower creates tension. Tension feeds reactivity. Stillness relaxes the system at its base. At the root of reactivity is fear. Fear of being hurt, fear of being wrong, fear of being rejected, fear of losing control. Stillness does not eliminate fear, it removes its authority. Fear may arise, but it does not take over. This happens because stillness provides safety that does not depend on external validation. When you feel internally safe, threats lose power. This internal safety was explored earlier as refuge. Here, its effect becomes visible in daily interaction. When safety is present, the nervous system does not escalate unnecessarily. The body stays regulated. Breath remains steady. Muscles do not tense as much. The emotional signal is received without triggering survival mode. This regulation is not conscious. It is learned through repeated experience of staying present without harm. Over time, the body learns that it does not need to overreact to protect you. It trusts stillness. This trust rewires reaction patterns. Another aspect of reactivity is the need to discharge emotion outward, to say something, to do something, to release tension. Stillness changes this impulse. Because the tension does not build to the same degree, there is nothing to discharge. You no longer need to vent constantly. You no longer need to justify your feelings. You no longer need to prove your point. This quiet reduces conflict. Stillness also changes how you experience other people's reactivity. You are less pulled into their emotional storms, not because you detach, but because you do not mirror their charge. This does not make you cold. It makes you steady. Steadiness is contagious. When one person remains settled, others often soften. Not always, but often enough to matter. Another subtle change is that emotions no longer linger. After an interaction, you do not replay it endlessly. There is no residue. The system returns to baseline quickly. This is one of the clearest signs that reactivity has ended at the root. Management creates fatigue. Neutralization creates ease. When you manage emotions, you are always on duty, monitoring, adjusting, correcting. When stillness neutralizes reactivity, there is nothing to manage. This does not mean you never feel strong emotion. It means strong emotion does not hijack your system. The difference is profound. Stillness also dissolves the habit of self-judgment around emotion. You no longer criticize yourself for feeling what you feel. This removes secondary reactivity. Secondary reactivity is reacting to your own reaction. Anger about anger, shame about fear. This doubles suffering. Stillness ends this loop. Emotions are allowed to be what they are, nothing more, nothing less. This allowance accelerates healing. Emotions that are allowed move faster. Emotions that are judged stick. Another important point is that stillness does not require you to understand why you feel something before it passes. Understanding can come later, or not at all. Feeling completes without explanation. This challenges the belief that insight is required for resolution. Sometimes resolution comes first. This is especially true for emotions rooted in early experience. The body releases before the mind understands. Stillness honors this order. As reactivity fades, relationships change. Conversations become simpler. Arguments lose fuel. Misunderstandings resolve faster. This does not mean you avoid conflict. It means conflict does not escalate unnecessarily. You speak from clarity rather than charge. You listen without defense. You respond without attack. This is not a technique, it is a consequence of stillness. Another benefit is emotional resilience. You recover faster from disappointment. You do not spiral. You do not catastrophize. You feel, then move on. This resilience is not toughness. It is flexibility. Flexibility allows emotions to move without breaking the system. Stillness also reveals that many reactions were not about the present at all. They were echoes of old patterns. When those patterns lose energy, present moment responses become more accurate. You stop fighting ghosts. This clarity makes life lighter, not shallow, but unburdened. Stillness does not make you indifferent. You still care, but care without reactivity is effective. You can say no without anger, yes without fear, speak truth without aggression. This changes leadership, parenting, friendship, and intimacy. Another subtle shift is humor. When reactivity fades, you can laugh at situations that once upset you. This laughter is not dismissal. It is perspective. Perspective emerges naturally when you are not inside the reaction. Stillness gives you that perspective without stepping away from life. The end of reactivity does not mean perfection. Old patterns may still appear occasionally. The difference is that they do not take over. They are noticed early and dissolve quickly. Progress here is not linear, but the direction is clear. Stillness neutralizes reaction by removing the need to defend an identity. When there is no identity to protect, reactions lose purpose. This does not mean you have no self. It means the self is not fragile. A stable self does not react reflexively. It responds thoughtfully. Stillness creates this stability. Over time, emotional life becomes simpler, not flat but clean, less cluttered, less noisy. You feel more alive because energy is no longer wasted on internal battles. This aliveness is grounded. It does not swing wildly. It supports engagement. Stillness does not turn you into someone who never reacts. It turns you into someone who is rarely hijacked. This difference is everything. Because when reactivity ends at the root, peace is no longer something you maintain. It is something that remains, even in motion. And from that peace, life can be met fully, honestly, and without suppression. This is the quiet power of stillness, and not control, not avoidance, but freedom. As emotional reactivity fades and responses arise without strain, a deeper shift becomes visible. Actions begin to change, not because rules were learned or values were rehearsed, but because the inner environment no longer generates conflict. What emerges now is quiet and unmistakable. A natural care for life, not chosen, not forced, simply present. This is where stillness reveals itself as an ethical force. Most people believe morality requires effort. Control your impulses, choose the right action, override selfish instincts. This belief comes from living in inner division. When the mind is split, ethics become a battlefield. One part wants comfort, another wants approval, another fears punishment. Moral behavior becomes negotiation. Stillness ends this negotiation. When the inner system is settled, when there is no constant defense of identity, when reactions are neutralized at their root, compassion no longer competes with self-interest. They are no longer separate. Caring becomes the most natural response because nothing inside is threatened. This is not idealism. It is physiology and perception working together. A deeply settled mind does not need to calculate morality. It perceives impact directly. When perception is clear, harm is felt immediately, not as guilt, but as misalignment. Compassion is not a rule. It is sensitivity. Sensitivity increases as inner noise decreases. When the mind is loud, perception is narrow. You see your own needs first, your own fears, your own story. When stillness deepens, awareness widens. Other people are not abstract. Their emotions, their vulnerability, their humanity are felt directly. This feeling guides action more reliably than principles. Ethical struggle exists because of inner struggle. When there is internal conflict, actions are driven by competing forces. Desire pushes one way, fear pulls another. Image management interferes. Even kindness becomes strategic. Stillness dissolves this inner tug-of-war. When there is no internal opponent, action becomes clean. Clean action does not mean perfect action. It means unconflicted action. You may still make mistakes, you may still misjudge, but there is no inner defense protecting the mistake. Correction happens naturally. This is why deeply settled people often apologize easily, not because they are weak, but because there is nothing to protect. Ego creates ethical struggle. Ego needs to be right, needs to be seen well, needs to win. Stillness removes this need. When the need to win dissolves, cooperation becomes obvious. Stillness also dissolves moral pride, the pride of being good, the pride of being conscious, the pride of being ethical. These forms of pride quietly undermine ethics because they turn goodness into identity. When goodness becomes identity, it must be defended. True compassion does not defend itself. It acts. This action is often simple: listening without interrupting, speaking honestly without cruelty, helping without needing recognition, setting boundaries without aggression. These actions do not feel virtuous. They feel normal. This normality is important. Ethical behavior that feels heroic often hides inner resistance. Ethical behavior that feels ordinary usually comes from alignment. Stillness aligns perception, emotion, and response. When alignment is present, ethical action requires no effort. Another important shift is that stillness removes moral urgency. Urgency often leads to harm even when intentions are good. Rushing to fix others, correcting without understanding, imposing values. Stillness slows this down. It allows space. Space allows listening. Listening reveals context. Context is essential for ethical response. Rules ignore context. Stillness perceives it. This does not mean relativism. It means responsiveness. A settled mind does not need rigid moral frameworks because it can sense what is appropriate in each moment. This sensing is not guesswork. It is perception unclouded by fear. Fear distorts ethics. Fear of punishment, fear of rejection, fear of loss. Fear-driven ethics are brittle. They collapse under pressure. Stillness removes fear at the center. Without fear, ethics become resilient. Compassion that arises from stillness is not sentimental. It does not indulge harm. It does not avoid difficult truth. It can say no firmly. It can confront injustice clearly. Because there is no inner aggression, confrontation is not violent. Stillness gives strength to ethics, not softness. This strength comes from grounding. When you are not shaken internally, you can stand up externally. Many people confuse calmness with passivity, but deeply settled minds often act decisively. The difference is that action is not fueled by anger or righteousness. Righteousness often causes more harm than the behavior it opposes. Stillness sees this. It acts without needing to prove moral superiority. Another key point is that stillness dissolves the boundary between self-care and care for others. When inner settlement is present, taking care of yourself is not selfish, and caring for others is not self-sacrifice. Both arise from the same clarity. You rest when rest is needed. You help when help is needed. There is no internal debate. This removes burnout. Burnout often comes from ethical struggle, from forcing yourself to care when you are depleted, or forcing yourself to achieve at the expense of others. Stillness balances these naturally. Balance creates sustainability. Stillness also dissolves judgment, not discernment but judgment. Judgment simplifies people into categories: good, bad, right, wrong. This simplification allows distance. Distance allows harm. When stillness deepens, judgment softens. Complexity is tolerated. Contradictions are allowed. People are seen as processes, not labels. This seeing does not excuse harm. It contextualizes it. Context allows effective response rather than reactive punishment. Another subtle shift is humility. Deeply settled minds know they do not see everything. This humility keeps ethics flexible, open to learning, open to correction. Moral certainty closes perception. Stillness keeps it open. This openness is why compassionate action remains appropriate rather than dogmatic. Stillness also changes how power is used. Power without inner settlement tends to dominate. Power with stillness tends to serve. Not because of moral decision, but because dominance is unnecessary when there is no insecurity. Insecurity drives misuse of power. Stillness dissolves insecurity. This is why ethical leadership is rooted in inner stability. Without it, rules become weapons. Stillness also reveals how much harm comes from unconsciousness rather than malice. This does not excuse harm, but it changes response. Education replaces punishment. Support replaces exclusion where appropriate. This intelligence is ethical intelligence. Stillness allows you to feel the ripple effect of action, not as guilt, but as sensitivity. You sense how words land, how silence affects, how presence influences. This sensitivity is refined. It does not overwhelm, it guides. Another important aspect is that stillness removes moral comparison, the habit of measuring yourself against others. This comparison fuels judgment and self-righteousness. When comparison dissolves, ethics become personal but not private. You act from what feels right, not from what makes you look right. This authenticity builds trust. People trust those whose actions are not performative. Stillness removes performance. Ethics without performance are quiet, often unnoticed, often uncelebrated, but deeply impactful. Stillness also allows forgiveness, not forced forgiveness, but natural release. When the system is settled, holding grudges feels unnecessary, not because you deny harm, but because you do not need resentment to protect yourself. This release frees energy. Forgiveness from stillness does not erase boundaries. It removes poison. Another shift is patience. Ethical patience is the ability to wait for the right moment to act, not because of fear, but because timing matters. Stillness gives access to timing. This prevents premature action that causes unintended harm. Stillness also changes how you relate to injustice. You do not turn away, you do not burn out, you engage steadily. Anger may arise, but it does not control action. Action remains precise. This precision makes ethics effective rather than explosive. Stillness also dissolves the illusion that ethics require self-sacrifice. True ethical action often feels satisfying, not pleasurable but aligned. There is no internal cost. This alignment is the opposite of martyrdom. Martyrdom comes from inner conflict. Stillness removes it. As stillness deepens, ethics become effortless. Not because life is easy, but because there is no inner opposition to doing what is right. You do not need to convince yourself. You simply act. This is the highest form of ethics, not rule following, not moral struggle, but natural response arising from clarity. Stillness is ethical not because it teaches values, but because it removes distortion. When distortion is gone, compassion is obvious. You do not need to learn compassion. You need to remove what blocks it. Stillness does that. It clears fear, clears identity defense, clears urgency, clears judgment. What remains is care. Care that does not announce itself, care that does not demand recognition, care that does not exhaust itself, care that lasts. This is why deeply settled minds naturally act with compassion, not because they are better people, but because nothing inside is preventing them from being human. Stillness does not make you moral, it makes morality unnecessary as a struggle, because when you are no longer at war with yourself, it becomes very difficult to be at war with the world. As compassion begins to move without effort and ethical action no longer feels like a decision, something even more subtle starts to loosen. It is not a belief, not a habit, not a reaction. It is the quiet sense that there is someone inside watching life happen. At first, this sense feels helpful, even spiritual, but in deeper stillness, it begins to fade. And with its fading, a profound simplicity is revealed. There is a moment that feels almost disorienting. Experience is happening, but there is no clear center observing it. Sounds are heard, sensations are felt, thoughts arise and pass. Yet there is no solid me standing apart, monitoring the flow. Nothing dramatic occurs, no collapse, no void, just a gentle absence where something used to be. This is the quiet death of the observer. For a long time, awareness feels like something you do. You observe your thoughts, you watch your breath, you witness emotions. This can feel freeing at first because it creates distance from suffering. Instead of being lost in experience, you stand back from it. You become the watcher. This stage is useful. It reduces identification. It creates space. But it is not the end. The observer is still a position. It is still a subtle identity. Someone is still standing apart, even if that someone feels spacious, calm, or wise. True stillness dissolves this position without violence. The observer does not disappear because you attack it or deny it. It disappears because it becomes unnecessary. At a certain depth of stillness, experience no longer needs to be watched. It simply happens. Awareness is not something you stand in. It is what everything appears within, without a center. This shift is often misunderstood. People fear that without an observer, they will become unconscious or lost. But the opposite happens. Experience becomes more vivid, more intimate, more alive. The observer creates distance. Its absence creates contact. When there is an observer, there is subtle tension. Someone is doing the watching, monitoring, maintaining awareness. Even if this effort is light, it is still effort. True stillness removes this effort. Awareness becomes effortless, not because you mastered it, but because no one is trying to be aware anymore. This does not feel like losing awareness. It feels like awareness losing ownership. There is no longer a watcher and the watched. There is just happening. This is not dissociation. Dissociation disconnects. This connects. You feel sensations more clearly. Sounds feel closer. The body feels more present. Thoughts arise without commentary. Life is no longer filtered through a sense of separation. The observer is born from fear and control. Early in life, awareness learns to step back to stay safe, to watch rather than feel, to observe rather than participate fully. This strategy protects, but it also divides. Stillness heals this division. When the system feels safe enough, it no longer needs to watch itself constantly. It can relax into experience. This relaxation dissolves the observer. The death of the observer is quiet because nothing is lost. Only an extra layer falls away. At first, this can feel unsettling. Without the observer, there is no reference point, no place to stand, no position to maintain. The mind may ask, "Who am I now?" This question fades when it is seen that the question itself belonged to the observer. Without the observer, identity becomes fluid, not absent but unfixed. You still function, you still speak, you still act, but there is no sense of someone behind the scenes directing the show. Life feels self-moving. This can feel deeply relieving. The burden of watching yourself constantly lifts. The effort of being aware ends. Awareness does not end. The effort does. Another way to understand this is that awareness stops being reflexive. It no longer turns back on itself to check if it is present. It simply is. This is why true stillness feels simple rather than profound. Profound experiences often involve an observer having an experience. Stillness without an observer feels ordinary, even obvious. Nothing special is happening, and that is what makes it free. The observer thrives on specialness, on insight, on states, on experiences. When nothing is special, the observer has no role. This does not mean meaning disappears. Meaning becomes implicit rather than constructed. You no longer need to interpret experience to feel its value. The quiet death of the observer also ends a subtle form of control. The observer often believes it must stay alert to prevent suffering. It watches thoughts to stop them. It watches emotions to manage them. It watches behavior to correct it. This vigilance creates strain. When the observer dissolves, vigilance relaxes. Not because danger is ignored, but because danger is not assumed. This reduces anxiety at a deep level. You stop scanning yourself for mistakes, stop monitoring your inner state, stop checking if you are present enough, calm enough, aware enough. These checks were the observer's job. Without them, there is peace. This peace is not dull, it is alive. Another subtle shift is that experience feels more unified. There is no separation between inner and outer. Sound is not out there. Sensation is not in here. Everything happens in one field. This field has no center. This is difficult for the mind to grasp because the mind is built around centers: self, other, here, there, past, future. The collapse of the observer softens all of these divisions. Life feels less compartmentalized. This also changes how you relate to thought. Thoughts still arise, but there is no one evaluating them from outside. They are part of the same field as sound and sensation. This reduces their authority. Thoughts no longer comment on experience from a higher place. They are just movements within experience. This makes them lighter. The observer often believes it is awareness itself, but awareness does not need an observer. Awareness does not watch, it illuminates. When illumination is recognized without a watcher, the observer fades naturally. This recognition does not come as a thought, it comes as absence of effort. You realize you are not doing awareness. Awareness is happening. This realization cannot be claimed. The moment you say, "I am no longer the observer returns. This is why the death is quiet. It cannot be announced. It is noticed only by its absence. Another sign is spontaneity. Without an observer planning responses, action flows more naturally. You speak without rehearsing, move without checking, respond without delay. This does not mean impulsivity. It means alignment. Alignment happens when there is no gap between perception and action. The observer creates gap. Stillness removes it. This gapless experience feels intimate. You are not watching life, you are living it. Many people fear this intimacy. It feels vulnerable. There is no distance to hide behind. But this vulnerability is not dangerous. It is alive. The observer was a shield. Stillness removes the shield when it is no longer needed. Without the observer, emotional life becomes even cleaner. Emotions arise and pass without commentary. There is no one saying, "I am angry," or "I should not feel this." There is just anger moving, then resolving. This reduces suffering further. Another important shift is that there is no longer an internal authority watching behavior. Ethics, as discussed earlier, arise naturally because there is no observer enforcing rules. Action arises from contact, not supervision. This makes behavior more authentic. The observer also fuels self-consciousness. The sense of being watched from within mirrors the fear of being watched from without. When the internal watcher dissolves, social anxiety often decreases. You stop performing for yourself. This is freedom. Stillness without an observer does not feel mystical. It feels normal, almost too normal, which is why it is often overlooked. People search for experiences that confirm awakening, but the deepest shift leaves no one to be confirmed. This is why it cannot be used to build identity. Identity requires a witness. When the witness fades, identity softens. You still have a name, a history, a personality, but they are tools, not definitions. This flexibility is deeply restful. The quiet death of the observer also ends in a commentary about progress. There is no one tracking where you are on a path, no one evaluating depth, no one measuring stillness. This ends comparison completely. Without comparison, there is peace. Not because everything is equal, but because nothing is measured. The observer loves measurement. It needs reference points. Without them, it dissolves. Stillness offers no reference. This can feel like nothingness to the mind, but it is fullness without edges. Life continues in this fullness. You still plan, still remember, still imagine. But these activities happen without a watcher supervising them. This makes them lighter and more functional. You no longer feel split between doing and being. Doing happens within being. This unity is what many teachings point to, but rarely describe clearly. The observer is not an enemy, it was a stage, a useful one, but like any structure, it eventually becomes unnecessary. True stillness is not observed, it is lived. And when it is lived, there is no one left to say that something special has happened. Only life unfolding without distance. This is not an ending, it is a simplification. The quiet death of the observer does not remove awareness. It removes the idea that awareness belongs to someone. What remains is experience without ownership. And in that absence of ownership, there is a deep, ordinary freedom. Nothing to watch, nothing to manage, nothing to be. Just this. As the sense of an observer fades and experience no longer feels divided, a strange phase often appears. It is quiet, almost too quiet. Nothing seems to be happening. No insight arrives. No emotion dominates. No story unfolds. And the mind, used to measuring experience by content, concludes something is missing. This is the point where many people stop, turn back, or assume they have reached a dead end. What they are touching, without realizing it, is the threshold where stillness feels like nothing. At first, this nothingness feels unsettling. The usual markers of meaning are gone. There is no excitement, no struggle, no clarity to celebrate. Awareness feels bare, empty, flat. The mind searches for something to grasp and finds nothing solid. And because the mind equates meaning with form, it labels this state as absence. But this absence is not a lack. It is a removal. Stillness feels like nothing because everything unnecessary has fallen away. What disappears first are the obvious things: noise, reactivity, inner conflict. Then more subtle things dissolve: the observer, the need to interpret, the habit of comparison. Eventually, even the sense of having an experience weakens. What remains does not announce itself. This is why stillness feels like nothing at first. There is nothing familiar left to recognize it by. The mind expects fullness to look like intensity, emotion, insight, energy. When those are absent, it assumes emptiness. But intensity was never fullness. It was stimulation. Fullness is different. Fullness has no edges. When stillness deepens, perception stops dividing reality into foreground and background. Nothing stands out as more important than anything else. Sound, sensation, space, silence, all coexist without hierarchy. Because nothing is emphasized, the mind says nothing is happening. In truth, everything is happening. This phase exposes a deep misunderstanding. That meaning must be dramatic. That truth must feel profound. That awakening must be noticeable. Stillness dismantles these assumptions. Nothingness is not the opposite of fullness. It is the doorway to it. Language struggles here. Words are built to describe things. Stillness is not a thing. It is the condition in which things appear. When the mind tries to describe it, it fails. And this failure feels like emptiness. But the emptiness is conceptual, not lived. If you stay without trying to fill this nothingness, something subtle shifts. The nothingness stops feeling empty, not because something new appears, but because perception changes. Instead of looking for content, awareness begins to sense presence itself. Presence does not feel like an object. It feels like openness, like capacity, like space that is quietly alive. This aliveness is not energetic, it is not emotional, it is not exciting, it is steady. This is where stillness begins to feel like everything. Not everything as in many things, but everything as in all-inclusive. There is no longer a sense of inside and outside, no longer a center and a periphery. Experience is whole, undivided. This wholeness cannot be described because description divides. It names parts. Stillness here has no parts. This is why people often struggle to talk about it. Any description feels inaccurate. Any explanation feels like reduction. The mind wants to know what this fullness is made of, but it is not made of anything. It is not built, it is revealed. When stillness feels like everything, it does not overwhelm, it does not flood awareness, it does not demand attention. It simply is, quietly sufficient. You may notice that nothing needs to be added to the moment. No thought, no action, no understanding. The moment is complete without modification. This completeness feels deeply satisfying but not pleasurable. It is more like a deep exhale that does not end. At this point, seeking stops, not because you decided to stop, but because there is nothing missing to seek for. The sense of lack dissolves. Lack was never about objects or achievements. It was about separation, the feeling of being cut off from life. When stillness becomes everything, separation dissolves. This does not mean boundaries disappear in a practical sense. You still function as a person, but the felt sense of being isolated inside experience softens. You are not inside life looking out. You are not outside life looking in. You are life happening. This sounds poetic, but it is felt as simplicity. The transition from nothingness to everything is not dramatic. There is no switch, no moment to mark. It is more like realizing the room you thought was empty is actually full of air. Air was always there. You just were not paying attention to it. Stillness is like that. It was always present, but unnoticed because attention was trained on objects, thoughts, and sensations. When attention relaxes its focus on objects, it notices the field itself. The field feels like nothing because it has no shape, but it holds everything. This is why fullness here does not feel crowded. It feels spacious. Spaciousness is not emptiness. It is capacity. Capacity allows everything to arise without conflict. When stillness is experienced as fullness, there is no urge to describe it, no need to share it, no impulse to prove it. It feels complete without recognition. This is one of the clearest signs that identity is no longer involved. Identity needs contrast, this versus that, me versus other, progress versus failure. Fullness beyond language has no contrast. It simply includes. This inclusion feels safe. Safety here does not come from control or predictability. It comes from the absence of resistance. Nothing needs to be pushed away. Nothing needs to be held. Because nothing is excluded, there is no tension. This tension-free state is deeply restful, not sleepy, not dull, restful in the sense that nothing is being resisted or pursued. This is why stillness eventually feels nourishing, like something fundamental is being restored. People often ask what to do in this state. The answer is nothing, not because action is forbidden, but because action is unnecessary. If action arises, it arises. If it does not, that is fine too. There is no preference. This non-preference is misunderstood as indifference. It is not. It is intimacy without grasping. You are fully present, but not leaning toward or away from anything. This balance allows joy and sorrow to arise without imbalance. Joy does not become addiction. Sorrow does not become despair. Everything passes through the same open field. Another shift here is that meaning no longer feels conceptual. You do not think, this is meaningful. You feel meaning as coherence, as rightness, as alignment. Meaning becomes implicit rather than defined. This implicit meaning is more satisfying than any explanation. The mind may try to return and label this experience. It may say, this is it, or this is emptiness, or this is awakening. These labels do not ruin it, but they are not necessary. Stillness does not depend on interpretation. Even the sense of fullness eventually becomes irrelevant. The words nothing and everything lose meaning. They were only useful as pointers. What remains is just this: life without commentary, experience without center, presence without effort. This is why stillness feels like nothing until it feels like everything. Because at first, the mind loses what it relied on, and then awareness recognizes what was always there. The transition is not a gain, it is a recognition. You do not become more, you stop being less. less divided, less distracted, less distant. This recognition cannot be rushed, it cannot be forced, it cannot be understood ahead of time. It arrives when there is no longer a need for it to arrive. This is why boredom, emptiness, and nothingness are not obstacles. They are signs that the surface has quieted enough for depth to reveal itself. Most people turn away at the nothingness because it feels pointless. They do not know that pointlessness is the final release from seeking. Once you pass through it, stillness is no longer an experience you have. It is the ground everything happens on. You do not feel full because something was added. You feel full because nothing is missing. And in that fullness there is no need to name it. Life continues, quietly, completely, as stillness is no longer experienced as empty or full, but simply as the ground of being. Something gentle and unexpected begins to surface. It does not arrive with insight or declaration. It feels familiar, almost forgotten. A softness returns, a quiet curiosity, a way of meeting life without armor. This is not regression. It is innocence returning, but in a new form. Innocence is often misunderstood. It is confused with ignorance, with lack of experience, with vulnerability that cannot protect itself. But true innocence is not about not knowing. It is about not being closed, not being defended, not being hardened by what has been known. Stillness restores this kind of innocence naturally. As layers of tension dissolve, as the observer fades, as nothingness opens into fullness, the system no longer needs to protect itself constantly. Protection is what closes innocence. Defense creates distance. Stillness removes the need for both. What returns is openness without gullibility. A child meets the world without expectation. Sounds are fresh. Touch is direct. Curiosity is spontaneous. This does not come from lack of intelligence. It comes from lack of filters. Over time, filters accumulate. Judgment, fear, habit, identity. These filters dull perception and harden response. Stillness dissolves filters not by removing knowledge, but by removing fear. Fear is what distorts innocence. Fear makes openness dangerous. Fear teaches vigilance. Fear teaches suspicion. When fear quiets, openness becomes safe again. This is why innocence returns only after deep settlement. Without settlement, openness would be overwhelming. With settlement, openness is grounded. You may notice simple things becoming vivid again. Light through a window, the sound of footsteps, the feeling of water on your hands. These experiences are not extraordinary. They are ordinary without commentary. This ordinariness is key. Innocence is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It does not seek meaning. It is content to experience. But unlike childhood innocence, this openness is not naive. It does not trust blindly. It does not forget harm. It does not ignore complexity. It simply does not carry defensive posture into every moment. This is innocence with wisdom. Stillness allows you to meet each moment freshly without losing discernment. You are open but not exposed, curious but not careless, soft but not weak. This balance is rare because it requires both vulnerability and stability. Stillness provides the stability. One of the clearest signs of returning innocence is reduced cynicism. Cynicism is armor. It is protection against disappointment. It assumes harm to avoid being hurt. Stillness dissolves this need. Without cynicism, you can see beauty without being foolish. You can trust without being blind. You can appreciate without attaching. This does not mean you ignore warning signs. It means you do not assume threat everywhere. Another sign is playfulness, not childish behavior, but lightness of engagement. Humor without sarcasm. Joy without grasping. Interest without agenda. This playfulness arises because effort has dropped. The weight of self-management is gone. When nothing needs to be defended, play returns naturally. Play is a sign of safety. Stillness creates internal safety. From safety, play emerges. This playfulness does not interfere with seriousness when seriousness is needed. It coexists. You can handle difficult situations and still retain lightness. This flexibility is maturity, not immaturity. Innocence also shows up as wonder. Not wonder at special experiences, but wonder at ordinary existence. The fact that anything is happening at all feels quietly amazing. This wonder does not distract you, it grounds you. Another important shift is how you listen. Innocence listens without preparing a response, without assuming intent, without filtering through past experiences. This kind of listening is rare and powerful. It allows true connection. Stillness removes the inner noise that interrupts listening. Without that noise, you hear more than words. You sense tone, emotion, and meaning directly. This does not make you vulnerable to manipulation. On the contrary, it makes you perceptive. Innocence paired with stillness is alert. Alertness without suspicion. Another aspect of returning innocence is forgiveness. Not forced forgiveness, but natural release. When the system is settled, holding grudges feels unnecessary. Not because harm is forgotten, but because it no longer defines the present. This forgiveness does not erase boundaries, it simply removes emotional residue. Innocence here is not about forgetting the past. It is about not living inside it. Stillness collapses psychological time. With time collapsed, the past loses its grip. Innocence becomes possible again because the present is not overshadowed by memory. This also changes how you approach learning. You are no longer learning to fix yourself. You are learning because curiosity is alive. Learning becomes playful rather than pressured. This makes understanding deeper and more flexible. Innocence also softens ambition, not by removing goals, but by removing desperation. You can work toward things without tying your worth to outcomes. This freedom allows creativity to flow. Creativity thrives in innocence. When there is no fear of failure, experimentation feels safe. Mistakes are not threats. They are information. Stillness provides the inner support that makes this possible. Another sign of innocence is tenderness toward yourself, toward others, toward life. Tenderness is not sentimentality. It is sensitivity without fear. This tenderness allows you to feel pain without closing. You can be touched by suffering without becoming overwhelmed. This is compassion grounded in stability. Without innocence, compassion becomes heavy. With innocence, compassion is light and sustainable. Stillness also restores trust in experience, not blind trust in people or systems, but trust that you can meet whatever arises. This trust reduces the need for control. Control kills innocence. Trust restores it. As trust grows, you stop bracing for disappointment. You allow life to surprise you. This does not guarantee pleasant surprises. It guarantees openness to what is. This openness feels alive. Another important shift is reduced self-consciousness. Without the observer, without constant self-monitoring, you stop performing. You stop editing yourself. You stop watching yourself from the outside. This freedom feels innocent because there is no image to maintain. You speak more simply, move more naturally, express without calculation. This does not mean you are careless with others. It means you are honest. Honesty without agenda is innocence. Stillness also restores a sense of ease with not knowing. Children are comfortable not knowing. Adults often are not. Stillness dissolves the fear of uncertainty. Without fear, curiosity returns. Curiosity without anxiety is innocence. This curiosity is not about gathering information. It is about engagement, about interest in what is happening now. Another subtle change is gratitude, not gratitude as practice, but gratitude as orientation. When innocence returns, appreciation becomes natural. You notice what is already here. This appreciation is quiet. It does not need to be expressed, it is felt. Stillness removes the noise that obscures appreciation. Innocence also changes how you experience success and failure. Success does not inflate. Failure does not crush. Both are experiences, not identities. This resilience allows openness to remain intact through ups and downs. This is innocence without fragility. Stillness does not make you childlike in behavior. It makes you childlike in perception. Perception without bias, without accumulation, without defensive layering. This perception is fresh. Each moment is met as itself. This freshness is not naive because it includes memory and wisdom. But memory does not dominate. Wisdom does not harden. The return of innocence is not going backward. It is going deeper. Deeper than conditioning, deeper than identity, deeper than fear. Stillness peels away what was learned to survive, leaving what was always natural underneath. This naturalness feels simple, unremarkable, and deeply satisfying. You may notice that you smile more easily, not forced smiles, subtle ones, a gentle friendliness toward life. This friendliness is not dependent on circumstances, it is a baseline. Stillness restores this baseline by removing what obscured it. Another aspect is trust in your own responses. Without overthinking, without second-guessing, you respond intuitively. This intuition is grounded, not impulsive. Grounded intuition is innocence guided by wisdom. Stillness also dissolves the fear of being hurt by openness. You realize that openness does not make you powerless. It makes you responsive. You can open and close appropriately. Innocence does not mean staying open all the time. It means opening without fear when opening is right. This discernment comes from stillness. As innocence returns, life feels less heavy. Not because problems disappear, but because you are not carrying them before they arrive. You deal with what is here, then let it go. This is how children live naturally. This is how innocence functions. Stillness restores this capacity without removing maturity. Maturity with innocence is wisdom without bitterness. This combination is rare and precious. It allows you to live fully without becoming hardened by experience. It allows you to engage deeply without losing yourself. Stillness does not strip you of what you have learned. It strips you of what closed you. What returns is not ignorance. It is openness that survived knowledge. This is the return of innocence, not as weakness, not as nostalgia, but as the natural expression of a mind and body at rest. And when innocence returns in this way, life no longer feels like something to manage. It feels like something to meet, moment by moment, without armor, without fear, simply here. Stillness is not silence you force, or calm you perform. It is not escape, and it is not absence. It is what remains when the fight ends, when attention matures, when the body remembers safety, when time loosens its grip, when the observer fades, when nothing needs to be improved, fixed, or chased. You've seen that stillness is weight, not float. Intelligence, not passivity. Refuge, not withdrawal. It composted old emotions without effort. It ended reactivity without suppression. It dissolved self-negotiation, ego, and moral struggle. It returned innocence without naivete, and in the end it revealed something simple and radical. Peace was never missing. It was covered by movement. Stillness is not empty. It is deeply settled. If something in you softened while listening, if a quiet recognition appeared, or if you felt a sense of, "This feels true," write "deeply settled" in the comments. Not for me, but as a marker for yourself. A reminder that you touched something real. And if this kind of teaching speaks to you, if you want more spaces like this where the mind can rest and understanding can arrive without force, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. These conversations are not about becoming someone else. They are about coming home. Stay close to stillness. It already knows the way.